involvement in public issues.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Testing.
Testing. There we are.
Good morning, everyone. Both those of you who are with us in our fellowship hall in person and those who are joining us online as we are reaching out to the circuit and district and those who might be interested in learning more about the issues of Christian liberties and freedom. We welcome you. A little housekeeping item for those who need to know these things. Restrooms for ladies are to the left outside the door and to the right for the gentlemen. We want you to keep this center aisle free of traffic as much as possible since we're wanting to capture things as well as we possibly can. So if you, during the course of the presentation, need to replenish your coffee, your juice, your pastries, whatever, you folks are fine over on this side. You sat strategically to where you're closer to the goods. Those of you over on my left and on the right side need to take your path all the way down the side and go underneath the camera at the end of the room. That way we won't have you as an issue. If you're tall enough, duck your head beneath the camera, if you would, please. So let's have a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord, for bringing Reverend Dr. Seltz and Reverend Frith here safely from their travels. And we pray, Lord, for all of us to be enriched and educated and further challenged so that we understand the issues that we're facing in these days, so we can better be the ones that you desire us to be to engage the culture that we're living in. Bless our presenters and bless all of us as participants as we gather in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Your attention to Reverend Dr. Greg Seltz, and he and Reverend Frith will let us out at appropriate times for us to share in a break. When we do break, you can leave all of your items here and just use those tables back in that back area. But it's your decision as to whether here or there. Reverend Seltz, he's going to share with us now.
Very good. Good morning. Okay, so what we're going to try to do, we've been at this before, and our next level of this is to give you the capacity to empower you to do what you need to do as God's people. So we are going to, again, talk about why we need to do this. That's going to be my part of the presentation. I'm going to give you a little bit of how-tos when it comes to, this is a voting year, 2024. Well, if all this is true and we believe these are the issues and these are our principles of engagement, well, how do we actualize this, Pastor? I'm going to give you a kind of vote platforms principled slide here, and that will be my practical aspect. And then after I'm done presenting, question and answer for 15 minutes or 20 minutes with you. You ask anything you want about what we're doing in Washington, etc. Then we'll take a break, and then after that, Reverend Frith is going to come on. The weakness of my work with you the very first few times that I was here was always, what next? What do we do now? Well, that's the Champions for Liberty network of churches, where we're building you as a network of churches all around the country so that you can take care of these issues that you need to take care of. And by the way, when I say take care of these issues, politics isn't going to save us, okay? I'm not here to say we're the follow, but we do have to deal with politics to do our mission. Because there are people who think we're the problem and they want to politically silence our ability to be church. Well, you got to do something about that. And I'm going to give you kind of an image of why it's important in my presentation. I'm going to say this is why I think God has given us blessings to actually deal with that, so you can do what? Keep serving, keep sharing, keep being the Christian neighbor to others that you can be. Now, like I've said to you before, I've been an evangelist in some of the toughest parts of our country. So don't anybody tell me that I've had some people say, well, you don't know what it's like. I know what it's like because I had to do this in New York City. I know what it's like. I was doing it in South Central Los Angeles. I dealt with the racial issues. I dealt with the political issues. The whole goal was what? Share the gospel. But I had to deal with the aldermen to share the gospel. I had to deal with some of the activists to share the gospel. And we're naive to think that they don't want to shut us down. So let's put our temporal liberties to work so we can keep sharing the eternal liberties of Christ. That's what Mark and I not only want to teach you, but we want you to finally be those people who can make these decisions here in Ohio. And if you need support and all that, Mark is going to connect you to other churches. We'll have other resources. And the one thing that we're working on right now, and I'll get to it later, is that we even want to have a platform. There's a group called Act for America. They do this with national security, but they have a platform now where if we have an issue that we think is important, they will let us use their platform. And the platform is just, it'll help you find your senators, your congressmen. It'll help you write your letter. It'll help you send the letter. You can do it all. I don't have to do anything. You can go to that platform through a portal that we're hopefully going to create. And so when it comes to marriage, religious liberty, sanctity of life, educational freedom, you can go there, find your congressman, find your senator, write your letter, send it off, and do that work yourself, and we will help you facilitate that, okay? So, again, great to be here with you. Before I get started, again, you don't even need that now, because we have something on your tables, and so it's called the Center for Religious Liberty. It's a little half-pager, but it's got all these QR codes, and again, it says join our email list. All you got to do is put your phone up to this, and it'll come up, you hit it, and bang, and then you fill in the information, and now you're partners with us. So take these things and give them to your friends, too, okay? And here's what will happen if you start to use this QR code. I want to show you real quickly our website before we get started here. And since we have a more intimate group, we can take a little bit more time on some of this. But look, this is our website now, and you can actually bring this up on your phones to, where did I go? No, that's, okay. So our website, LCRL Freedom, is now much more phone-friendly. Okay, so you can pull all this stuff up on your phone. But look at, we have a podcast, we have an events page, we have a blog, we have a Champions for Liberty network, which you'll hear about later, and also resources. And as you scroll down through this, here's one of my favorites. We have little videos that if you just pull them up and say, To Kingdom Citizenship, what's that about? We have actually a video, and these are all there for you. So let me just show you what that means.
Testing.
You can just pull this up.
Honor your father and your mother that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. It's not just a Christian commandment, but an accepted reality in virtually every culture. Being a parent, a professional, or a public servant, these are vocations where God is at work to create order in the face of human brokenness. A society that honors these vocations can last, but one that does not jeopardizes liberty. When Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, he extends this honor your father and mother mentality secondarily to the vocations where God is at work in this world. That's why Paul can call Christians to submit to the authorities. Vocational respect while seeking justice. That's how Christians participate in the public issues to keep things civil now, so that we can speak about God's saving works forever for all.
So we've got little videos like this that talk about our principles, all that stuff. That's there for you. There's 7 of them if you want to go back and look at those. The next thing we have is the Monday, the Word from the Center. Some of you are partners with us there. We get a devotion every week. Fridays we have an op-ed about issues that are out there in the culture. Then our events page, and then we also have the podcasts. If you notice, the level of people I'm interviewing now is kind of going up. It's partly because I'm now a radio host in Washington, D.C. It's called The Drive Home with Greg Seltz on WAVA 105.1. So I interview all these folks on that, and then I package it back to our radio program called the Liberty Action Alert, and also this podcast. Well, again, Jason Mediatas, I just interviewed him. He's the Attorney General of Virginia. We talked about all the issues we talk about, why we have to engage these things for the sake of religious liberty. That's the kind of information that's in these podcasts, okay? And then, of course, we have a foundational Liberty Action Alerts. Like if you want to understand some of the concepts of what we're going to talk about today, we have more resources there. And then our Champions for Liberty Network, Mark will talk more about that, but there it is on the webpage, et cetera, et cetera. And then we even have bulletin blurbs if you want to put stuff in your weekly bulletins, and on and on and on. So you can actually get that on your phone right now and be scrolling through all of this stuff. You can listen to it in your car. You can, when you're out and about. So these are the kind of things we want to keep you, we want to keep information flowing to you that matters and keep you abreast of the situation. And so that's all there for you. Okay. Let's get to what I want to talk about today. And that is that you were fashioned again for such a time as this. Well, what time are we talking about? So when I put this first slide up, I don't know, I interviewed Mark Houck. Do you know the story of Mark Houck? Probably you do. The person who was a pro-life activist. I hate that word. That's not what he was. He basically goes out in front of, I don't know if you know the scenario here. They have the abortion clinic where he's at, and they have a pro-life clinic right across the street. I don't know if you knew that. And this whole point was, and so, there's this FACE Act where they treat these pro-life people like they're the mafia. That's what it's supposed to be used for organized crime. But what they do is, here's the entrance over there. Mark is standing way over here, and all he's just saying is, if he's saying, God bless you, and if you want any information, we're here for you, as people are going into the clinic, and it's way over there where they do it. He's done it for years and years and years and years and years. His 12-year-old son was with him. And there's this one guy, and so don't tell me we're too old or too young. This one guy was 72 years old. He's a counter activist. He's the kind of guy that loves to get in your face, scream epithets at you, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's what happened. He's got his 12-year-old son, and this guy who's run into Mark many, many times starts to come, but he starts to target his son. And he even starts to call vulgar names of his father to his 12-year-old son. And finally, he's just, Mark's just like, son, get behind me. Get behind me. Don't listen to him. And the guy is getting in his face. He's doing all these kind of things, all this. And then finally, the boy was getting scared, right? And the guy went around and went at him again. And that's when Mark just went, you're not doing that to my son. And the guy fell down, and he bruised it, or he got his, and he sued. That was it. That's it. That's what happened, okay? Philadelphia PD, all that kind of stuff, nobody brought in. They said, this guy, he's a kind of arrogant SOB, but, whatever. These guys, it's fine. No charges were brought at the city level. No charges were brought by the state. Well, then Biden sixed the DOJ on Mark Houck. What wound up happening was Mark Houck, for a whole year and a half, they kept saying, are you guys going to bring any charges against us? I mean, we're happy to stay. And finally, his lawyers said, listen, if you guys are going to bring charges against Mark, he will come in voluntarily. Just let us know when you want to do this. So he called up, and I think it was 3 days after that phone call, the FBI raids his home with 15 to 20 guys with guns drawn at 6:45 in the morning, before dawn kind of thing, bursts into his house. He's got 7 children. They were scared to death. Guns are being pointed at all of them like this, and they're little itty-bitties, and they drag him out in his pajamas and drag him to FBI headquarters. This is what has to stop. This has to stop. And it's purely because of his pro-life views. It has nothing to do with anything egregious that he's done. He hasn't committed any of those things. So, again, I keep asking, are you on this list? And we just got to understand there is a group in our culture today who thinks every one of us should be on this list. That's the problem. So if I run down the names, Jack Phillips, he's continually being sued. If you know the Jack Phillips story, and by the way, some of you probably have forgotten, he's still being sued. And one time he said to me, I said, Jack, how are you surviving this? He goes, well, Greg, it's okay. When it becomes a news story, people pray and they send well wishes, even some resources. But as soon as this news story goes away, all that goes away, and they don't stop. He said, they're targeting my children now. They're targeting my family now. They're bringing they don't stop. He said, sometimes I get weary. And he started to kind of get a tear in his eye, and I thought, wow. And Jack's just the nicest guy you'll ever want to meet. He serves anybody who comes into his shop. He doesn't differentiate whether you're homosexual, a bisexual, heterosexual, man, woman. He just said, you want to buy that? Great, I'll serve you. But if you want me to make a penis cake or something like that, special order, I have certain things I don't do. Well, they're saying if we decide to tell you to do it, you're going to do it. Well, that's not the America I grew up in. So again, Jack Phillips, how about Baronel Stutzman? I've told you this story before. The elderly lady who had a florist shop for most of her life, they sued her and put her out of business. Why? Because she would not serve her friend's wedding. Her friends came in, they're homosexuals, were getting married. They've worked with Baronel. Baronel's worked with them in many other things before, but she said, I don't really believe that marriage and homosexual marriage are the same thing, but I'll be happy to, God bless you, but I don't want to. There's a florist on the shop that'll do that. They said, great, Baronel, we just want to give you kind of right of first refusal. They didn't sue her. The state of Oregon sued her. And they just finally resolved it. How did they resolve it? They put her out of business. She agreed to shut her shop down. Otherwise, she was going to be up for hundreds of thousands of fines and things like that. So you go down the list. Lori Smith, you just heard, now she did win her case. That's good news. But her point was she wants to be a Christian designer, web designer. And she puts that out there. If you want to use Christian design services, I'm your gal. They said you've got to be open to non-Christian design things. She said, no, I'm a Christian designer. So she fought the case. In this case, she won. We'll see how far that goes. Mark Houck, Joe Kennedy. Do you know the story of Joe Kennedy praying at the 50-yard line? After the game, long after everybody's gone, has been doing it for years, they suddenly decided that is nefarious. We have to expunge that from society. So this is the kind of thing. It's this notion somehow that's being cooked up in our culture that the church is the problem in society. It really is. Now, my only question to you is, are you going to just let them caricature us as that? Or are you going to say, wait a minute, the church is the solution in society, and we're not the solution. We're just as broken as you are. I get that. But This Jesus is amazing, but God's moral law also leads us to Christ. It brings us to repentance. So we're a law gospel people. We think this is a blessing. All we want is the freedom to be who we are for the sake of others. That's it. No. As I've said before, please try to understand the way things are today. It's not liberal conservative. John F. Kennedy was a classic liberal. John F. Kennedy and conservatives, even though they argued about the level of politics and all these different things, they still believed in fundamental principles. They believed in fundamental truths. They believed in the stuff I'm going to talk to you about, but they had different ways of activating government towards that. That's not who we're up against. We're up against what I call secular statists. Who, remember in 1960 when they said God is dead? Do you remember that? We probably should have protested more about that back then. But the God is dead movement, there is no God, there is only the state. That's fundamental to every socialist, fascist movement in the last 100 years or so. That's who we're dealing with in America today. They don't believe in fundamental principles at all. They don't believe in constitutional limit of view of government at all. They don't even believe in liberals and conservatives are both their enemy. But they tend to target and caricature us. But they want to wipe all that nonsense out. All we're saying is no to that. That's my work. That's Mark's work. We'll teach you how to do that so that you can do what? Share the gospel with your neighbor across the fence without being arrested for being who you are. So are you on this list? The reason why the last person on the list, you can't really see it, the Traditional Liturgical Catholics of Richmond, Virginia. Did you know they're on the list too? The DOJ had them targeted as a potential terrorist group. Because the Southern Poverty Law Center, anybody who believes, in fact, did you hear this latest thing? And I've got a podcast coming up on this, Christian nationalism. And this is what bothers me, is I call it the cycle of silencing, where they make an outrageous claim against us. We generally don't respond. That's the problem with the church. We don't respond at all. We just kind of say, I hope it goes away. But let's say we do respond, and then some people actually internalize the accusation, and then we start arguing amongst ourselves. And it splits us, right? But it's a ridiculous accusation, because it's not true. I've not yet to meet a Christian nationalist in D.C. But I can guarantee you, the way you hear it in the news, you're thinking, well, then you don't know what's going on, Pastor, because there's a bunch of them. They're out there. But the woman came on and she said, anybody who believes that your rights come from God and not from some government, she said, that's Christian nationalism. That's the foundation of America. That's the Declaration of Independence. That's the constitutional limit. Who is she? I would say she's the one you better be nervous about. And so again, as we get into these things, I even have a podcast about what do you say when someone accuses you of Christian nationalism. We'll teach you how to deal with that stuff. But again, my point is there is a group that wants to caricature you, demonize you, and you're thinking, well, let's just dialogue with them. No, this group, we have to defeat them in politics. We just do. And the struggle is going to be, well, but what does that do to our witness of Jesus? And I hope that I'm going to teach you how to do them both very well. Okay? Is that fair enough? So that's what we're going to do in this one, and just know that we are on this list. To the people, and so again, I talk about the present-day reality. We've talked about all this. You've even probably read these books, but there is a culture war. But again, since I know you're doing Bible studies on it, and et cetera, what do we always say about the culture war? What do we say as Christians? We don't care whether we win it or whether we lose it. What do we care about? Anybody? Whether we engage it. See, this is where I think our Lutheran church is a little bit remiss. We tend to write about these things 50 years later. And then we get it all right because we show that group didn't do it right, this group did it right. Well, when you're a culture warrior, you got to make decisions in the middle of this stuff. And you're going to make some bad decisions. And you need to learn how to repent and forgive, and you need to learn how to, because sometimes we do the wrong thing in the middle of the battle. But you're thrown into the middle of the battle. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel, Esther. Mordecai said, "This is what I want you to do, Esther." And she goes, "That'll get me killed." What are you talking about? But if you don't do it, God's going to raise somebody up. Yeah, it gets to be a little crazy. Mordecai, yeah, he wanted Esther to do a certain thing, but she's the one that's going to lose her life. And then she finally says to Mordecai, "Okay, I'll go do it, but probably you won't see me again." But again, so in the middle of all this, I'm just saying, are we engaging? And right now, they're actually saying that our children are not male or female. Well, if they convince our children to emasculate themselves and to defy their parents and to actually, they're really saying there is no God in heaven who made you male. There is no God in heaven who made you female. And there's no God in heaven who sent his son to come and redeem you and restore you so that you could be the person that he created you and redeemed you to be. That's what's at stake. And we're sending a lot of, even Christian parents are sending their kids into these public school factories, and they're coming out hating God, hating their family, hating all these things, and they're saying, what's the church doing about this? Well, first of all, don't send your kids there, but my point is you've got to engage this, because our kids' lives, our lives, those that we love, even the neighbors we love, this is all at stake. So engage, engage, engage. So we're going to talk about some of those engagement aspects. Now, just to give you an idea that Mark and I are very well read, and we have fought through all these things on every level. The issue, what people don't seem to understand, it's almost like God gave us this thing called American First Amendment protection. I don't know if you know how incredible that is. I'm going to do a Bible study with you tomorrow on Daniel. Daniel in the lion's den, right? What happened? Just real quickly, what happened? Now, you still got to come to Bible study tomorrow. But what happened? Daniel suddenly becomes an enemy of the state. He didn't do anything wrong. There were people who couldn't stand Daniel. They made a law. Suddenly Daniel's illegal, and hey, they somehow got the king, or he couldn't take his word back, et cetera, because it's like the word of God in that particular culture. And bam, he's in the lion's den. What did God do? He shut up the lion's mouth. Well, I'm here to tell you that we are always in the lion's den. That's part of what it means to be Christian in a broken world. But God isn't doing something as directly miraculous as that. God has given us this thing called the First Amendment, and that means that all the lions' mouths are closed. And I got Christians who are saying, take the thing off the lion's mouth. No! And when they do, I want to put it back on. That's the politics of it. And by the way, I'm going to talk about how God has a use for lions. Lions are to keep the bad guys at bay. So when we turn them towards the bad guys, we unloose them. That's what the police job is. But when they turn towards us law-abiding citizens, God gave you that. Just as miraculously as Daniel had the lion's den's mouths closed. First Amendment actually closed the mouth of what I call the lions of government, the lions that have a role to play in our life, but a limited one. And there are Christians who want to unravel that as if it's, we're getting too political. No. God gave you that. It's a real special blessing. So ultimately, this is what I call, these are people who are taking off they're unleashing the lions. They think that we don't need Christianity anymore. We don't need God anymore. We're just going to be lions set loose, and we're going to make a utopian nation. The final solution of Hitler, what was the final solution? Anybody? You watch Discovery Channel, or you watch, not Discovery, you watch History Channel. What was the final solution? Get rid of the Jews. Well, why do you want to get rid of the Jewish people? He was a racist fascist. I don't know what that means, but that's not the main reason. Yeah, he was all that. What was the main reason? Why did Hitler really have to get rid of Jewish people? Anybody? See, we got to teach our children this. This is history. This should be something every American child knows, because we fought a war over this. Why did he want to get rid of the Jews? Man. Yes. Every socialist regime, and by the way, socialism and fascism are the same thing. They're just different sides of the coin. So Hitler hated socialists, but he was a national, so he was a fascist. In that sense, he wanted to, it's still going to come down to the state runs everything, okay? So the funny thing today is people think that Christians are fascists. Christians are the anti-fascists. That's who we are. But here's the point. Every one of those regimes did believe that there was no God, there is only state, and that anybody who believes there's a God, which is a God who gives you your rights and your, who you are, your dignity, we have to wipe them out to actually bring this utopia in. Well, who identifies with the Old Testament more than Christians and Jews? And the Old Testament says that God created you, not the state. That the family and the church are the main organizations. The state is an afterthought because of our sinfulness. That teaching had to be wiped out. And so Hitler said, the first group that's got to go are the Jews. Because it's their, he said, it's their book. But he thought we were Jews too. He thought we were a Jewish sect too, Christians. So we'd have been next. That's the final solution. It's very much, it's a ideological crushing of a view that happens to abide in a people. Okay? That's what was being crushed by Hitler. He lost. Mussolini marched on Rome. He was going to try to destroy Rome so he could actually be the fascist dictator that everybody loved. Well, he lost. Thank God. Well, America is the last entity from a political standpoint that believes that there's rights that you have that come from God. And that's why the secularists are working in our culture to wipe it out. So that's who we're dealing with. We're dealing with that same idea that there is no God, that you're just a machine. Darwin says you're nothing but animals. The environmental movement that we're dealing with today says human beings are the real problem on the planet. You're getting, where does all this come from? It comes from this notion that there's an elite group of people who know how to run life and we're supposed to all just obey them. So that's what we're up against politically, because there's a group that's kind of wedged itself into our culture, and they are working very clearly to do what these guys are trying to do militarily, they're trying to do it politically. And that's so for such a time as this, the Esther story, if you're a person who's in politics, we got to talk about what your role is in politics. I just talked to a person on my podcast, and his whole goal is to go to Washington, D.C. and give power back to the people. Do you know how odd that is for a politician to talk that way? Most politicians want to go to Washington to do what? Amass power for themselves and amass wealth for themselves. I said, are you going to be tempted like they all are when you get there? And he says, yeah, Greg. He said, but listen, I've been a businessman all my life. I've already made my wealth. I don't need any of that. I'm going back there to get rid of this nonsense so other people can be mom and pop people who have their own businesses and they can take care of their families. I know what I know because I've lived it already. Okay, good. Maybe he's a good one. You never know. But it's so counterintuitive to send a politician someplace to give you back your power, right? So in some sense, that's what Esther's job was. She was supposed to actually go to the king so she could protect her people. But by the way, what was Esther ultimately protecting? Not her Jewish people. What was she ultimately protecting? We're not going to talk about this in Bible study tomorrow, so we should do it now. Esther was not, and Esther was an Old Testament person of the promise. What was the promise? Adam and Eve, God said, I will send a what? Messiah, a Savior. And then he put that promise in a people. Why? So you could track it in history. And so he said, Abraham, I'm going to make you a blessed person. Why? Because I've got a promise that I'm going to bring to fruition through your line, through the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You can keep and so when suddenly these promised people are in Egypt, it's not just that they're going to get wiped out, the promise will get wiped out. So that's the tension of the Old Testament. And now at the very end, you got even the promised people are even smaller and smaller and smaller. And now they're at the whim of this guy too. Oh my gosh. So she wasn't just defending her people. The fact that Esther did her work is the reason why you know Jesus. That's my point. She fought for this little battle that God gave her to fight so that people like you and me could come to know her Savior. Now, she didn't know that Savior yet. She was still a person of the promise. You're a person of the promise fulfilled. And all we're saying, you should just be like Esther. Do what you need to do. If you got some person who wants to squash the promise, fight that so someone else can receive it. And that's what she did. That's what you do. That's what we do. Okay? All right. I know I'm just trying to, I know a lot of this is review for you, but we've done this before. We talked about Walter Meyer when they tried to kick him off the air. You know the story, right? Lutheran Hour. They tried to kick him off the air in the 40s. I always ask people, what should he have done? Because this is the FCC. This is the government. Should he have fought back? Because that's political. He did. But how did he fight back? Remember? What did he do? Did he go in and say, the Bible says that I have a right to be on the radio? The FCC would have said what? Well, that's not a good argument, because some of us don't read your Bible. No, he argued Jeffersonian freedom principles of the First Amendment. And he said, and by the way, Walter Meyer, you just got to get to know him. He actually not only argued it, he said, and by the way, you should let us go on the radio for free because we're a public service. They said, no, you're paying. We actually paid full price during the Depression on CBS radio. Man, what a lion. Okay? So we fought this. He learned how to do both. He learned how to block bad government and serve the gospel. Now you're seeing how we've got to be today. We have to learn how to block certain things while we serve other people. So it's written, I believe, therefore I have spoken. So the whole point is we come to grips with the fact that there's a God in heaven who created and ordered the world. He's the one who tells us what government's main role is and what it's not. He's the one who tells us what the church is. He's the one who actually differentiated church and state. Did you know that? If you run into a secular person who says, separation of church and state, what do you say? Well, actually, be careful there, because this is your teaching, not theirs. Because Jesus said, give to Caesar what is, and give to God what is. So he differentiated church and state. Yes. And not only that, the main organization, that's the wrong word, the main vocation is the church. So the state is, like I said, there are three institutions God created, the church, the family, and then in Genesis 9, the state. But the least important one is the state, which is why the founders did what? Limited the state and set free the individual citizen, motivated by their faith, morally directed, and self-governing. They thought that was the solution to all of our problems. You, motivated by your faith, morally directed by your relationship to God, and self-governing, that was how we were going to solve the big questions in life. And so church state, this church is on the top. The people we're dealing with today, they're trying to do this. They use this separation of church and state caricature as if they created it. What I usually say is, I didn't know you were a Christian. What? I said, that's our teaching. We don't use the word separation. It's differentiation of church and state. And I've written on that, and you've already researched that. So let me tell you what that means, because you obviously don't know. And it's that the state is the least important entity. It's free people doing the right thing, motivated by their relationship to God, who care about their neighbors, even their enemies. That's the solution. And the state has a role to play. In fact, what's the main role of the state, since we're talking? The main role of the state is just make sure that the bad guys don't really mess up law-abiding citizens' lives. That's it. The number one thing that is destroying our cities today is they're doing exactly the opposite of that. In every city in America, they're undermining the family in every policy decision in America, in the cities, and they're letting criminals go like you've never seen before. And I've lived in those neighborhoods. The average person in those neighborhoods wants police in their neighborhoods. They want the gangs put back. They want criminals arrested so they can do what? Raise their families. Go to a school that their kids learn something. Black, Hispanic, and poor white people want parental choice so they can get a better education, so that kids can make it in this world. All the actual values and policies that work are on our side, but we're being demonized as the bad people. We got to fight that back. And that's if you care about your neighbor. When I was in Los Angeles, no, it was actually in New York, this is when I learned about politics in church. We started a preschool, and we wanted to get people to start to teach their kids about these virtues and values that would actually help them succeed in life. And we were empowering. We even wanted to start a school. We were going to empower people in the neighborhood, whether they join my church or not. So, if I'm in a neighborhood and the first thing I can do is set a good school that's better than the public school, and it can get these kids on track to actually make it, we'll do that even if they don't join our church, okay? Guess what I started to find out? That as you empower the neighborhood, the alderman gets ticked off. Why? This shocked me. I thought the alderman would say, hey, way to go, let's do it together. How can we be a service with you? I thought that's what the alderman was going to do. He was like, who the heck is this guy? What do they think they're doing over there? Send some of those investigators over to their preschool and make sure that they're not doing anything wrong. Why would he do that to me? Anybody? Dependency versus empowerment. In politics, you want your people ultimately dependent. If you're a selfish politician, that's what you want. You want them to say, we got to keep electing that person or we'll never make it in life. I was teaching them, you don't need that guy. Now, occasionally there's some things you need from them. You tell them. But the rest of it, you take care of it yourself. You can do it yourself. Your kids can do it on their own. They can make it. And that's when I began to realize, public schools just like that too. They don't want to educate your kids because they want dependency. So when you start to get involved in these things, you go, wow, we're at odds here. And so I want to empower the neighborhood. I want to bless even those who don't join my church. That's a threat. And we just need to say, wait a minute, we know what we're doing here. We care about this. We're going to do our best. And by the way, you are the politician. You serve us. We don't serve you. Let the chips fall where they may. Okay? So again, I just think it's exciting to be a Christian right now. Let's just be Christians and bless people. And if we wind up getting in trouble for that, fine. That's okay. But right now you have protection. All right, so it's time to speak. It's time to actually be active. It's time to make a difference and to be public Christians for the sake of others. So the question we always have to ask before we start to say what's the next step of this, and I know I'm going quickly, but a lot of this is review. A lot of you have already heard lectures on this. I'm just refreshing you on this until we get to some of the practical application. Before we ask what should we do, what do we have to ask as Christians? Okay, what is God doing? See, sometimes we think God, again, we have this notion that God sits in heaven and goes, well, I wish those Christians would do something because all hell is breaking loose in the world. No, he's always active. When Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, God did not wait for them to come to him. What did he do? He came looking for them. I wish, this is where you Lutherans got it right. I wish you knew that. A lot of people have this notion that God is like this. And if you just get the principles right, then God opens up to you and says, I love you now. No, it's the exact opposite. He's chasing you down. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? Because God is with me. God is with me. Surely goodness and mercy will chase me down. That's what it says in Psalm 23. So the real biblical picture is God's chasing us and we're running away from him. And he catches us. He sends his son while we were yet sinners. So this is the same notion here. God is already at work. but he works two different ways. And that's the Lutheran blessing to the culture today. If we could start to learn how to differentiate God's work, we would be able to clarify a lot of these crazy discussions that are going on today. The sad part is even Lutherans don't really fully understand how to deal with this. It's our heritage, but we call it God's preserving work and God's saving work. God is already active in the world to preserve the world and to save the world. And this is where it gets a little dicey. God actually preserves the world through Caesar. Now, if you're a first century Christian and the pastor gets up and says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, pray for Caesar, honor Caesar, you'd be like, those are fighting words. My friend just got killed by Caesar. They just hung him up and lit him on fire. They're persecuting Christians. What is this honor Caesar nonsense? Peter, you'd be arguing with St. Peter right now. And I don't think we argue enough with St. Peter, because I know a lot of you are sitting there going, I don't really believe that. Well, argue with Peter, who was hung upside down on a cross to make sure that he wasn't hung the same way that Jesus was on a cross, and he taught you to honor Caesar. Now, he doesn't say accept everything that Caesar does, and Paul tells us what Caesar's supposed to do and what he's not supposed to do, and if Caesar gets out of his box, we have every right to preach against it, but you give him the honor that's due him. He is God's rule of law, because there are guys even worse than Caesar. Anybody see what happened with Hamas? And this notion of we're equivocating it now, oh, that's just like, no, there's an evil there that is unbelievable. The video, I've talked with the people who were telling me what was on the video, what they were doing to innocent people. They were enjoying doing this to innocent women and children. They were beheading little babies. They were violating women over and over and over again by several people, and they cut their heads off, and they broadcast it back to their family, and the families were cheering. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, because somebody's got to stop that. And they will not be dialogued with. They will not be shared with. And that's what police are for, and that's what armies are for. There comes a point where you have to stop that. And so again, as we look at these issues, I'm just saying God's already at work, because there are some guys out there that even make the criminals afraid. Remember? And that's what Jesus says. He said, my kingdom does not come through the sword. My kingdom does not come through force, but God is preserving the world even through Caesar. Now, that's the most extreme version of God's preserving work. And the other ways that God preserves the world are even through the vocations of moms and dads. If you're a good mom and dad, do you know how much blessing you're bringing to the world? You just raise your kids so that they don't have to be raised by somebody else, so that they already can take care of themselves. You know what a blessing that is? And so legislation that honors and empowers families, that's a beautiful thing, even if it's a non-Christian family, as long as they raise their kids. Now, it doesn't save. God's work of preserving the world doesn't save the world, it preserves it. Do you understand the difference? He saves through the person and work of his son, Jesus. And that's the realm of the church to proclaim uniquely. But God is at work even through Caesar, and the church has a role to play in making Caesar does his job. And if you learn how to differentiate that, I'll give you a time when I really messed it up. You ready? Okay, this is the first very young pastor, and I get a phone call. A person is going to commit suicide, and they call me. Will you go? And, of course, I said, of course I will, you know? And I put on my cape, and I got in my car, and I went over there, and I talked him out. I talked him down, and everything, and I was just so proud of myself. Oh, you know, we shared the gospel, prayed with each other, cried. I got home, and my wife said, don't you ever do that again. I was like, what? He could have killed you. I hadn't thought of that. But again, when someone has a gun, you send in the people who deal with guns first. They have the ability to deal with that and the ability to protect themselves. And he said he could have taken me hostage. He could have done all kinds of things. He could have killed his family and then killed me. And all. That's not your job. send in the police and then go to the cell and do your pastoral work and be there for him and get through the trial if there is one. That's your job. Kind of like the chaplains. We send chaplains into the military with our people. They don't carry guns. They're there for a whole different reason. And so, when you like the Red Cross and the chaplains, when an enemy targets them, they're an especially evil enemy because they're unarmed. But who's crazy enough to send unarmed people into battle? We are, because we think there's a spiritual dimension even to battle. Human beings could be even worse than they are if we didn't have some kind of corrective even there. That's one of the reasons why we also do the same thing with our police. We decide what that badge stands for. We vote for the laws that they're supposed to enforce. We don't just say, go ahead and be a police any way you want. This is what a unique place we have. That we start to look at what Caesar can do and what he can't do, and then we leave the rest of it to free people to do for each other. And the founders set that up for you. And that's what's being taken away from us. So before you do anything, you better know how God does things. And that's one of the things of course, on our website, we teach you the differentiation of church and state. We teach you vocational respect, seeking the truth. We teach you how to do reformation, restraint, seeking justice. Let me give you that one. Remember that? And these are all things you can go read about. And you got to start to internalize this, because when you get involved in political, cultural things, it's much messier. Well, I shouldn't say that. Law, gospel, sharing the gospel can get real messy too. But there's always an answer when you're sharing the gospel. Sometimes there's not an answer when you're dealing with this stuff. There's just trade-offs, right? In fact, when it comes to left-hand kingdom stuff, there is no answer. Because if there was an answer that we could vote or that we could coerce you to do, then there would be no need for a cross. So the point is even in this left-hand kingdom stuff, so we have this thing called reformation restraint. When I was involved in city ministry, you'd get involved in these issues in the community. There's violence, there's this, there's that. And you'd come in like, here's the answer. No, that's not how you do it, because God could already be preserving that neighborhood through some really good things that may not even be Christian, but they're moral. They're ethical. They're virtuous. And so you come in and you go, reformation restraint says, I got to see what God's doing first. He doesn't save through this. He preserves through this, and I don't want to undermine what he's doing in that. So reformation restraint that still seeks justice. That's how we do it. In the Ferguson issue that happened in St. Louis, there was a pastor who I believe practiced reformation restraint, seeking justice. He was a black pastor. He was not a Lutheran. He probably doesn't even know he was practicing one of our principles. But when they were coming to burn the police station down, and they were going to burn it to the ground, because they had already accused this policeman of doing it. He actually he did what he was supposed to do. That's another story. Had a bad ending, but he still did what he was supposed to do. And this black pastor comes up and says, stop! And he's looking at this angry crowd, and he says, you stop. This is my neighborhood. This is our neighborhood. And he's looking at some of the neighbors. He says, well, a lot of you I don't even know. You're not going to do this. And then he went to the police station and he talked to them because he knew them too. He said, you guys got to come out with me. And he dragged people out of the police station, and they resolved that situation. Now, he did not know whether the policeman was guilty or was innocent or any of that. He did not know if Michael Brown had done the wrong thing or the right thing. But he said, we're not doing it this way. He literally saved that neighborhood. And eventually, they went through the whole process. He said, we're going to get to justice, but we're going to do it this way for the sake of my neighborhood. That's reformation restraint, seeking justice. What a beautiful thing. But he was at risk, right? They could have walked right over him, too. But again, that's how the church should be in the middle of these things. So again, that's what I call two kingdoms. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, that's why. But make sure Caesar's on the bottom. There's a whole lot of laws today that put Caesar on the top. That's bad law. It just is. If you got a law that says the school board is more important than the family, or any of God's moral teachings are less than this, that's bad law. I mean, that's putting Caesar on top and God on the bottom. It just doesn't work. So again, as we get involved in these things, I just want you to see this is how God engages. Remember that's the picture of the pulpit. where the angel Gabriel is keeping the Dayton Dragons at bay. I actually went and saw him last night. We froze to death, except there was this pastor who had this incredible, I don't know what it was like an electric quilt or something. He was so toasty, but he didn't share it. He just was, he walked to the car by himself like this. I was doing like this, and as I could not barely open the door because my hands were so cold. I did that. But the Dayton Dragons, we went and supported. But in this particular, see that at the bottom of his feet, those are dragons that are trying to pull the pulpit down. And this is I call him the knight. He's keeping those dragons at bay so that the pastor can walk up and freely preach the gospel. That's our symbol of what we do. I just don't train the pastor anymore. I don't train the evangelist. I don't train the witness. I train the what? I train the knight to keep the dragons at bay. That's what I'm saying. When you understand our work, this is tough because I used to be an evangelist. I used to teach you how to share the gospel, how to get past all these different things to actually share Christ. Now I'm protecting the people who do that. That's also godly work. It's just not as sexy. It's just not. What's the analogy we've been using? The football analogy, right? Yeah, so if you think about football, and I'm going to bring it to you later too, but if you think about football, think of the quarterback, the wide receiver, the running back. They're the evangelists. Let's throw the ball. Touchdown is when someone comes to faith. We win. Every play, there's these guys. Boom, boom, boom. And half the time when the running back is scoring the touchdown, the offensive lineman is what? Probably on his face, on the ground. He doesn't even know what has happened. We're the offensive line coaches of offensive line people. And we do a little blocking ourselves. I'm just saying that if you don't have an offensive line, you don't score the evangelism touchdowns too. So I'm here to teach you how to be an offensive lineman. It's not sexy. No one interviews you after the Super Bowl game. They don't say that offensive line was the best that's ever played. Let's hear about. No, they go to the quarterback. Don't worry about that. But do know that blocking is godly work too. Doesn't save, but it allows the saving message to get out. And we got to do a better job of blocking. Okay? All right, so God engages the world to preserve and save. That's what we've been talking about. I hope you realize that it is necessary. I'm not going to read that quote, but it's a quote that I go to over and over and over again because I've never heard it said more clearly. Robert Reich, at the very end of this incredible quote, says to us that the church is basically a worse enemy in our culture than terrorists. That was his, I think I've got the quote. Is it necessary? Yeah, the true battle of the 21st century will be between modern society and anti-modernists. And I got rid of all the other things. He actually said between this and that and this and that and this, and he was caricaturing us. But at the end he said, terrorism will disrupt and destroy lives, but it's not the greatest danger we face. You Orthodox Christians are. I'm just telling you, we got to beat that guy in politics. He is a defensive lineman or a linebacker who's coming right for my quarterback. And I'm saying, guess what? He ain't getting to my quarterback. I don't care. Now, if you want a dialogue with Robert Reich, you can. I've told you there's an evangelism answer to Robert Reich, too. I don't have any problem with trying to dialogue with him. But he teaches your kids politics. He now teaches at Berkeley political science and policy. He's not worried about dialoguing. He's worried about policy that will shut your voice out of the public square. So all I'm saying is he's a linebacker who's blitzing your quarterback. If you want to have a dialogue with him, have it after the game, after you crush him. See, that's why, do you see, in left-hand kingdom work, I can block you to the ground and crush you and still serve you in the name of Jesus. We've mixed this up so much that we're actually saying, oh, go ahead, hit my quarterback, because I want to be loving and tolerant and caring for you. Well, then our quarterback's flat on his back. Our message is in the basement. We're now demonized as the nefarious, worse than terrorist group in the country. How are you going to share the gospel with that? So I'm just saying we've got to face it. I don't know, I don't have every answer to how to deal with this. That's why when the latest caricature smear of us Christian nationalism came out, I had this guy on, and he said, here's how you do it. I went, good. I'll put that up on my website so my people can listen. You know, I've learned how to do things the wrong way enough to where I think I've got some wisdom to teach you how to do it the right way. How's that? When I was a young man in evangelism, I went into the church because Darwinism. I was a science major. I really wanted to, I wanted to be a physician. I was in the Iniflex program. I'd clept into that. That's where I thought I was going to go. They started laughing at my faith in my biology classes. They started laughing at my faith. Then I'm forced to teach these sociology classes where they're studying baboons and say, this is what it's like to be a human being. And I'm like, this is not what it means to be a human being. What's going on here? And so I argued and well, anyway, I used to get into these arguments with people. What guys have taught me how to do, he said, Christians are too defensive. We get smeared and we defend, but we just keep being put on our heels. He said, we've got to learn how to go on the offensive, not so much to be brutal or to be mean, but to get to the real heart of an issue. And obviously the heart of an issue is this is still God's world. He's ordered it, and God is the only one who can solve these things. That's the ultimate issue. How do you get there? Well, when people used to say, I'm a Darwinist, I'm a secularist, I would start to defend our view, defend creationism, defend all. They're just laughing at me because they've got me on the back heels. Here's what I do now. I said, are you a Darwinist? Yeah. You don't, you actually believe in all that? I mean, even as it applies to sociology, yeah. I didn't know you could be a racist in America, modern America. What? I'm not racist. You have to be. It's the foundation of racism. There's a good book out, it's called The Day of Darwin now, where it actually shares with you all the quotes. He actually says white people literally need to wipe out all these other inferior species. He actually, that's the Planned Parenthood foundational teaching. You got to get rid of these ones that are not keeping up with, the Darwinist natural selection. It's the foundation of racism. You're the antidote to it. Because you're the one who says God created all people, and all people are created in the image of God, and all people have inherent dignity. You're the antidote to that, even if you're not very popular right now. But you've got to actually turn it around. And when I turn it around that way now, they go, oh, I'm not a racist. Yes, you are. And then I actually teach them what they actually believe to the point where they go, I guess I am. Well, here, why don't you come and listen to another way of thinking about it? It's a much different way to do it than to be always on the defense. You turn it around, and you turn it right back at them. Just like when separation of church and state. I used to argue. No, I just say, I didn't know you're a Christian. That gets them. Holy cow, they don't even know what they're doing now. Then I teach them what they think they know about it and where it came from. We're not a theocracy. We're the people who actually taught differentiation. That's the whole Western tradition. That's why we have what we have today. They don't know any of that. How about this one? And I was in a situation with the pro-life movement. I've got a lot of good stuff coming up on the pro-life movement because we're being told the pro-life message is a losing message. You guys got whacked here a little bit because you didn't know how to message some of this stuff, right? Well, we're going to help you with some of that. But here was one. I was in the middle of the post-Dobbs ruling, which got rid of the constitutional veneer of this. There's no constitutional right to kill children. That's not there. But, okay, let's say now we got to deal with it. Now we got to talk about it. Well, we were at the counter-protest, and people were screaming. And I was just out there, interviewing people. I said, hey, what do you think about this? And I was trying to hear what they were saying. There's a guy over there. He's a Democrat for life. He's got a sign that says Democrats for life. How do you think he was being viewed in that crowd? They were crucifying he and his wife and a couple other women that were there. Did you know there's 25 million pro-life Democrats? Did you know that? They just have been pushed off their platform. We'd like to get it back on their platform. That's fine. Because it's politics. It's not going to save us, but we can get it on there. Anyway, so I got saddled up with him. I'm trying to help them from getting overrun, and we're debating. It got to a point, and I said to them, the crowd, why do you think we're here? See, you got to turn this around. You got to get to the heart of the matter. They weren't expecting me to say that. They were expecting me to just either, respond to their criticisms or whatever. I said, no, why do you think we're here? Because I could be home watching a ball game. I could be drinking a beer. We won the case and, blah, blah, blah. Why do you think we're here? And they said, you're here to rub our noses in it. You're here to make fun of it. I said, no. We're here for you. See, do you know what you would say after that? That's what we're going to teach you how to say. I said, we're here for you. Listen to what your state officials are saying. They're saying that there's certain human innocent life that's not worth living. And we can coercively say that the state can wipe that life out with no ramifications. And I'm just going to tell you, it's the child in the womb right now. But when you get a little older and you become a little less useful to the state, there's going to be some crackpot who says, that life's not worth living. We got to get rid of that. They're costing us money. Or hey, then you get ideologically out of step with the state, and this happens in every socialist regime. You get ideologically out of step, your kids turn you in, guess what? That person's suddenly gone, because that was a life not worth living from the state's point of view. What's our argument? The state never has that right. And then I turned to it, I said, your life matters so much that we're here defending you from that, because there will be a day when they come for even you and me. And I said, they never have that right. They undergird rights we already have. What do you think they said to me? They said, we used to believe that. We didn't think you could anymore. See, do you see how we have to learn how to turn this around? We're not just defending ourselves. Yeah, that's part of it. But we want to make sure the messaging gets out. That's what I'm defending. Then we got to learn how to message it upstream from politics so that that person says, you know what? He's right. They don't have that right to take. They don't have the right to start classifying what lives get to live and what lives don't. We're talking about innocent lives. They always come at us with can you kill criminals? It just popped out of my head. Capital punishment. You pro-lifers, you're not consistent. I said, we are absolutely consistent. We have innocent life. The state can't do anything about it. But if someone comes in and kills innocent life, then the state has a role to play in either putting them to death or actually giving them life in prison because that life was so precious. Our view is completely consistent. That's the whole reason for a state. The state was supposed to punish the people who loved violence. And that's the one thing they don't do anymore. So again, as we get involved in this, I'm saying we have a beautiful message. We're not this threat. We're the antidote to this threat. But he is that kind of threat to us. So let's push that back where it belongs. All right, just a couple of things. We engage the world on God's terms. I'm going to move now quickly through this because, let's see, what time did we start? We should be finishing up pretty quick, shouldn't we? Okay, 9:30. Can you give me about 15 more minutes and then we'll take questions? Will that work? And then we'll take a break? All right. Let me go. I'm going to move ahead pretty quickly. Christian left-hand kingdom work. That's what we're talking about. We've talked about this already. We differentiate God's actions. It puts politics in its proper place. You do know this. Good politics cannot save us, but bad politics can destroy us. So we're pushing back on bad politics. That's it. Reformation restraint, talked about that. Here's the issue. That's why I included this slide. We've actually already talked about this before. What's under attack in our culture today is this notion that God created the world and ordered the world, and it's his world. That's what's under attack. So this notion that you're created male and female says who? It's God's world. We signed a left-hand kingdom document called male-female. We will not use the word heterosexual. We will not use the word homosexual, bisexual. Those are constructs. We will use the words male and female. We'll talk about healthy male to male, healthy female to female, healthy male to female. We will talk that way in all of our policy stuff on the Hill. I signed it. A lot of other Christians signed it. Some atheists signed it. Some Hindus signed it. Some Buddhists signed it. Some Muslims signed it. Then some of you got mad at me for signing it. And I said, why are you mad at me? Well, you're signing with all these non-Christian organizations. I said, yeah, left-hand kingdom work, yeah. The Declaration of Independence is a left-hand kingdom document. Are you telling me I shouldn't sign that? So what if some atheist signs it? I'd rather have an atheist who believes in the Declaration than one who doesn't, right? Who is that? Hitchens is the guy that says he's a cultural Christian. He said, I'm not a Christian, but he said, I don't like the fact that Christianity is losing its hold in Britain because cultural Christianity is what gave us freedom. Okay, so my point is that in left-hand kingdom stuff, if you'll do these preserving, if you think marriage isn't really important, it's more important than government, if you think, sign that document, I'll sign it with you. As long as that's not the gospel. That's the role of the state in our lives. So, God's created order and moral ordering of the world is a beautiful thing. We have to learn how to message that better. When your kids used to come home to you and say, I want to go to a party, and you said no, what was the issue? You had to learn how to say what? My no is a beautiful thing. There's so many things in our life today that we're being told that if there's any word no in it, it's evil, it's brutal, it's wrong. No can be a beautiful thing when it's God's no for the sake of your life, your soul, as a parent, you had to teach your children that there were certain things, no. How many of you had perfect attendance and perfect response with those kids? My Father, you're so wise and so wonderful. How did I ever think otherwise? No, probably your kids were like, you don't know anything about it. You're so old, blah, blah, blah. There's the new way of doing things, Dad. And then they come around later and think how wonderful you are. But you had to endure the moment of no is an ugly thing. Well, God's moral ordering is a beautiful thing. We have to learn how to apply that to honor your father and your mother. Do you know kids don't even want to have families today? Did you know this? We're teaching them. It's destroying our culture. Your civilization cannot exist if people stop having children. We're like, no, but I can still take a vacation to Aruba. No, you'll be the last one, because there's a whole horde of things that'll come when society implodes. And so you start to think this is crazy talk, but beautiful things about family. Thou shalt not steal, which means private property is this notion of everything's owned by everybody is false teaching. There is no such thing. How many of you ever have gone to a place that's owned by everybody that's nicer looking than your house? That's why. Because you have pride, you take care of this, you want it to grow, you want it to be clean. If it's owned by everybody, nobody takes care of it. And that's what we found out in a lot of our stupidity. So as we look at these things, God's moral ordering, all the commandments are kind of functionally curbing us from our worst intentions and calling us to repentance. We've got to be God's moral voice in the culture too, even to ourselves. That's what makes it hard. The last challenge, it makes it hard to be that moral voice. Why? Because you're just as broken as everybody else. That's what makes it hard. And just like your kids will even say to you, well, you were like this when when you were my age, and the answer to that is hopefully not yes. But okay, so I was, but I learned. I don't want you to go through the same process. Whatever. Okay? All right. I want to get to this last slide because I know we're running out of time. All right. These are two unique slides. You've never seen these slides before. If they're not in your packet, I will get you these. But to be a two-kingdom citizen in the American context, God is the one who does it, give to Caesar. In the biblical context, Caesar was up here, right? Where is Caesar today in America? So we pray every Sunday. We pray for our magistrates. We pray for our leaders. We pray for all that. We give the impression that Caesar's up here and we're down here. That's not correct. The truth hasn't changed, but we've been given a different context for this truth. And I'm telling you, we better start to figure out that context and be better at it because there are people manipulating it away from us. Where is Caesar in America? And where? Huh? No. Who? Who's at the top? Well, okay, you're talking about the bad folks are putting Caesar back up there. Okay. I'm saying, where is he according to our constitutional organization? According to American polity, the way the founders wanted it, where is Caesar? Okay, he's on the bottom, okay? You're Caesar. That's the point. The citizen is Caesar in that sense. And so, yeah, in the actual practice of the Caesars that we need, he's on the bottom, right? But who runs your house? You do. The citizen is Caesar. So if you're praying for Caesar, you're actually praying that I be a good father, that I be a good mother, that I be a good husband, a good wife, that I take care of, and that I be a good worker so that I have enough money to take care of my family, because I'm Caesar of this house. Well, you can't run everything. So the founders said we do need government. So what? Well, we need to hire a lawn person. Okay, that's the governor. We need to hire someone who organizes the plots of land that we all get to own. Okay, that's the president. But they don't run my house. They are servants to my house, and I've been given Caesarship to actually do this. And the other thing is we need people to protect, us. So we'll let the governor, who's the gardener, also have some other people who are out and keep safety at bay. That's a whole different mindset. And what we're doing is letting people come into our house, take over our house, and then we go back out and garden. And we pray for them. American polity put you in charge of your country. If you don't vote, you're abdicating your role that God gave you. God gave you this. It's never been done in human history. And when people don't even vote as Christians, shame on us, because we've been given this. Then he actually bound the government to certain things. Federal government was only supposed to do certain things. We let it out. We let the lions loose, and then we wonder why God, did this to us. But again, we did all these things because we still didn't really come to grips with the fact that in American polity, yes, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's, but he even allowed you to be your own Caesar of your own house. Man, do you know how cool that is? How much responsibility you have? Don't look, too many people, even in our polity at the Lutheran Church, do you know we have a president, right? We have a president of our church, and do you know where they are? The pastor is actually at the top of our polity. The president of the synod is down here. Because he's a servant. He has literally no authority. The Catholic Church, the bishops and all those guys are above. Look what can happen there when they start doing the wrong thing. But in our polity, the pastor and the church are at the top, and all these other people are servants to them. That's why even the DP cannot come in and tell you what to do. Now, you need to be faithful. You need to be faithful to the calling. You need to be faithful to the truth. Your pastor doesn't have the right to be unfaithful, but this is not a top-down polity. It's a bottom-up polity, even in our church. Same thing in America. And we're allowing people to flip it around as if it'll be better. Now, in a chaotic moment where nobody wants to live self-governing, morally directed, faith-motivated lives, yeah, I guess then we need a despot to come in and shut us down. That might be coming. Because we have people now who think freedom is freedom to do whatever they want. You can't live that way in a self-governing community. But again, when you look at accept your Caesar work, I'm trying to get people to understand it. And one of the ways you do it is by pushing back on people who say, no, we're going to do that for you. No, you're not doing that for us. It's not your job to do that. Keep the government's role limited. Take responsibility for family, for church, for community as an Ephesians 2 neighbor. That's what I'm advocating. And when some government official comes and says, no, we'll be the Ephesians 2 neighbor in your place, you say that is a mixing of the kingdoms. You get back in your place. Get thee behind me, Satan. Is that a little overkill? But honestly, that's what the founders actually thought was the better way to organize. Ben Franklin, what did he say? We just gave you a constitutional republic if you can keep it. And as governor, since everyone says, well, he was a secularist, he was a theist, he wasn't even really a Christian. Do you know what Ben Franklin, as governor of Pennsylvania, said the two most important things were to keep that state healthy and wealthy and alive and dynamic? Go to church every Sunday and read your Bibles every day. Ben Franklin said that. Don't tell me that these guys. We were a nation of Christians. That we don't have God in the Constitution does not trouble me at all. Because I limit the government to very specific things. And if you want to know about the soul of our nation, you don't look to our limited government, you look to the citizens who are living Christian lives. And we're still a Christian nation to some degree to that. Not proud of it, but the way we're doing it, but that's another thing. But I always say, if you limit the government to filling a pothole, that's all I want the government to do, fill that pothole and fill it every time it comes up. I don't care whether you're a Christian or not. I don't have to describe it in terms of God motivated you to actually fill the pothole. That's why our Constitution doesn't mention God at all, because it's what kind of government do we want, not what kind of citizen should you be. Okay? All right. Let's get to one last slide and then take questions. Okay, so we're blocking the criminalization of Christianity. I will leave this up over breaks because people are going after parental authority, they're going after the family, they're going after all moral norms, and they're reclassifying the church as a secondary organization. All that is happening in policy right now, and we are pushing back on all of that, okay? Well, you can maybe ask questions about that. The last thing I want to talk about, it's time to speak and act. Here we go. Come on, come on. All right. This is also brand new. We have a two-kingdom mindset now. We have an understanding of what we want government to do, and I can even give you principles when you think about what to vote on, what kind of judge you want. I'll give you the principles, you make the decisions. But these are some of those things. Check the platform. What is the platform saying this government stuff is going to be about? And all we're saying is I want that government platform to align with a limited government that differentiates the government's role, keeps it very clear so that I can do the church's role, that I can be about this stuff freely with my neighbors. If the government says we're going to raise your family for you, that's bad law. Don't ever vote for it. It just continues. Look what's happened in our cities. In 1970, actually, if you go back further, go back to the Jim Crow era. I dialogue with black conservatives all the time on the Hill and on my program, and some of them will be on our website too. In the 20s, it was 5% illegitimacy in the black family. 5%. That the family was the antidote to protect them from Jim Crow. Do you know what the numbers are today in the cities? 80% of children grow up with only one parent. 80%. That's the black family. 60% poor Hispanic and 45% poor white. What's the problem with this figure? It's rising everywhere where parents or people are having sex and the children are cast-offs and they're being raised like wild weeds by schools and running the streets. Whereas it used to be mom and dad, that was the first line of offense and defense. We were told back in the 70s, if we continued down this road, we would destroy our culture. We're way past that now. I don't know how we get back from this. But again, part of what we do is we're not going to vote. Black Lives Matter, the reason why we stood against them and most black conservatives, they want to destroy the family. It's their number one thing. Because that way you are a ward of the state and will concoct a state to give you things that other people don't have, and we're going to take care of it that way. No, they're going to destroy our culture. Every socialist wants to destroy two things. They want to destroy the family and the church. And we have this movement of socialism, secular statism in our culture today, as if it'll be better than what we have now. No, it won't. It'll be much, much worse. And then the question is not, should this be done? A lot of times people go to the polls and say, we got to do something about this. No, when you're going to the poll, you're saying, what's the state's role in doing something about this? So you and I can disagree on some things. You might say, no, Greg, we got to do a much better job of this in the neighborhood, blah, 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 blah. I might say, well, I don't agree with that. I think it's going to. But the real issue is, do you want the state's coercive power to do that when people disagree or not? That's the LGBT issue right now. The trans issue is you will teach transgenderism in your parochial school. Right now, we have an exemption from that. They're trying to right now in Minnesota, they're wiping out all exemptions. And if you teach what the Bible teaches about sexuality and about healthy sexuality and family, you will be shut down if they get their way. And so again, as I look at this, and by the way, the transgender movement issue is, it's going to, either we're going to go over the edge or we're going to come back, because even J.K. Rowling is standing against the transgender movement. Okay? Even homosexuals are standing against it. What we're doing to our children, 80 to 90% of kids that go through puberty eventually resolve their issues with their biological sex. And I'm not saying it's going to be, sin is everywhere. I don't know, how do you think about yourself? I mean, come on, if we're going to get honest, a lot of us are like, I hope he doesn't find out about that, We all know where all this stuff goes. Our ultimate solution is your identity is in Christ. And then you can even deal with your own sins. And your sins might not be my sins. I get all that. But what I don't like is when they say the state is going to tell you what's sin, what's not sin, and how you're going to resolve it. No, just no. That's where we should be able to agree, even if we disagree about other things. The gay marriage issue is the same way. I used to argue with these guys on the Hill, and I finally said, don't you understand? I don't care what your view of marriage is. I'm saying you don't have the right to enforce your view on me. And if the state can't limit its role in marriage to a man and a woman, because they're worried about your kids. They don't want to raise your kids. If the state can't limit its role of taking away the rights of a man and a woman, making them sign a contract called marriage, states never grant rights. They only honor the rights you already have, or they take them away. Then they should get out of the whole marriage business. Leave that up to us. And you know what they said? Oh, well, we don't agree with your view of marriage, but we agree with your view of the state's role in marriage. That's what you're voting on. You're not asking the state. This is not their business. Do not look to Washington to tell you what a healthy relationship is. If you met some of these people, you do not want to know what they really do behind the scenes. All right. Are we using biblical wisdom properly? Remember, I taught you how to ask the right question. WWJD, what would Jesus do? That's an evangelism question. WWFD is the political. What would the Father have us do to order this world, to preserve this world? And I vote accordingly. Because what does Jesus really do? He said, you do whatever the Father tells you, because that's what I do too. Okay? Are we seeking to empower the family, the church, the school to freely make moral, self-disciplined choices? If that's what you're voting on, that's good. If you're voting against that, that's bad. And right now, a lot of our policies are shifting the moral authority over to some other entity for the sake of your kids. There's laws on the books right now in some states where they're actually saying you don't even have to tell the parents what we're going to do to that child, even though they're under 16 years old. What? Remember, you had to ask them if you could give them an aspirin. You still have to do that. You have to call, can we give your child an aspirin? But we're going to take them to the abortion clinic, or we're going to take them to the gender clinic, and you will never know a thing about it. What? Common sense. You don't even have to be Christian to know that's wrong. So again, does the state have the power to do that in place of the family, the church, the school? And then finally, do these political laws violate the curbing power of the Ten Commandments? You just get to a point where these are God's laws. C.S. Lewis said you can't have a new fundamental law any more than you can have a new fundamental color, because God made the colors and God made the laws. And my soul will never find rest until it rests in Him. Now, does that mean we always enjoy being told no by God, or enjoy being told, to go this way, that way? But I can tell you right now, the last commandment, what thou shalt not covet, we have a whole politics of coveting today. That just can't be good. Where the state uses its power to say, give the money to the coveters and take it away from the law-abiding citizens. Jeez. So that's kind of the mindset, come to fruition, 2024. Mark's going to now even talk to you about becoming a champions person and how to actually become part of a network that learns about this. I've told you all these experiences I've had where I've had to learn how to say it this way, say it that way. Well, how can we learn about that? Well, churches are going through that. We're going to try to connect you to each other so that you deal with these things together, you learn together. But it still goes down to the same thing. God is at work. He works two different ways. We differentiate those ways. We jump in, reformation restraint, but we seek justice on his terms. And then vocational respect, that's the only one I didn't talk about today. Ultimately, if you're going to solve a lot of problems, you got to just be the Christian person you were called to be in the middle of all this. That's how God solves problems. It doesn't always mean it's easy for you Christians, because you could be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You could be Esther. You could be Daniel. Or you could be one who's got a great job, has a great family, lives in a wonderful place, and you retire and everything is great. And you did your work. I don't worry about any one of those. I just say, be the person in that place you were called to be. And don't ever forget this. All right, so I'm going to stop there. I guess my next thing would be, do you have any questions about particulars? Because, like right now, when I say a lot of these policies, there's a thing called the Respect for Marriage Act. It was passed. Our federal government. Now, I'm a federal guy. We're trying to build state coalitions of you folks, right? We want churches in Ohio to get connected to each other, to go through this training, but then you become, we're even trying to see if we can work with some, eventually, I think our goal would be to work even with the DPs and see if we can have somebody on staff who actually watches over the Ohio stuff or watches over the Michigan stuff. I watch over the federal stuff. Now, why is that important? Because the federal stuff can wipe you out if they do it wrong. Right now, we're battling something. I'm going to be putting this up very quickly. Frank Gaffney, who's a name you may know, but right now, President Biden is usurping the treaty methodology that's in our government, and he's working with the World Health Organization, WHO, to actually create a response to crisis. So if we ever have another pandemic, who will define the pandemic? Who will execute a worldwide plan to deal with the pandemic? And every American citizen's sovereignty will be given to who in that scenario? It will bypass the states. It'll even bypass the president. And Biden is actually negotiating that to happen. So and I'll give you, in fact, before we leave, we got to give them a place where they can go to sign that petition. We're responding to that. We're saying you don't have the authority to do that. You can't give away our sovereignty it's not even an American entity. But then you also know that WHO doesn't just work with health stuff. There's environmental crises, there's economic crises, there's racial justice, all these different things. WHO defines the pandemics too. And so again, that's just one of those things where you're saying the Senate was supposed to be able to vote on that. They actually lost the vote 49 to 47 to stop Biden from doing this because we didn't have enough Republicans to push back on it. And so the Democrats with President Biden want to sign a contract with WHO that's run basically by a socialist, a Xi-appointed socialist, to actually be able to control the worldwide response to pandemics. And we're saying they don't have that authority. So we're going to push back on that. I hope the next election will wipe that out, but he could do a lot of one lawyer told me they will have 9 months of putting structure in place, that even if you turn it back, the structure will be there, which is that every one of you will have a WHO number. Remember, Horton, here's a WHO. You'll have your Social Security number and your WHO number. And there will come a point where in a pandemic, the WHO number will be more important than the Social Security number. What? See, so that's, when I say the stuff we're dealing with, there's stuff on the Hill that we have to deal with. And I didn't even find out about this until about 3 weeks ago. I interviewed Frank. Frank's going to be on there. We're going to have a place to go to set this up. But I kept asking, why would our government do this? But that's who we're dealing with. They just don't think a constitutional republic and free citizens can run their own lives. I disagree. So any other questions, any thoughts? The Respect for Marriage Act was a bit like that. It was starting to really push this LGBT stuff against the churches or schools or preschools. we had defections. One of our own senators from Wyoming, Loomis, she voted for it. Overnight, she flipped her vote. We asked her later. We even had pastors who went and talked to her. I had sent some information to her. I said, this is the wrong thing to do. You don't have the right to make our view illegal. And she said, I'm not doing that. I'm just being tolerant. I still believe in our view of things. I just think we should have a tolerant government. I said, that's not what you did. You weaponized the government against us. So again, we've got work to do on all these things. So the Respect for Marriage Act, I call it the Disrespect for Marriage Act, is now a federal law. We'll see if they haven't litigated it yet. They haven't really come at us yet. I think they're letting it settle down again, and we get comfortable. And then when they decide to start rolling it out, we may have to do what J.K. Rowlings is doing. Did you see what she's doing? Because she's not on our side on virtually every other politics things, but when it comes to male and female, she's right there with us. She's like, no, this is crazy, this stuff we're saying that you can change your genders, your sex. And so Scotland has a law now that says if you don't teach it you can go into jail. You know what she did? Arrest me. I got a pastor right now, there's another here in America, the Johnson Act, where if a pastor's if he's talking about any of these things from the pulpit, we'll take away his tax-exempt status, et cetera, et cetera. So pastors don't even talk about moral issues anymore because we don't want, that's so silly. We're the moral conscience of the culture. You know what this one pastor's doing? He said, I'm trying to get arrested. I want to smash the Johnson Amendment. It shouldn't shock you that Lyndon Johnson is the guy behind that. So any other questions about what we're doing? Oh, and the last thing about you and me, if you are seeing something in Ohio and you've got a bunch of churches who are very concerned about it, it can't just be you as an individual because they won't listen on the Hill if I come up and represent one of you. But if a bunch of churches, maybe you get your circuit and you're saying, we've got to talk about this. Look what they're doing to our parochial schools, or look what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. And you want me to go talk to your senator or your congressman, I'll run it up the hill. Just put it in a letter. Sign it off, and I'll run it up the hill for you. If it's religious liberty, sanctity of life, marriage as an institution, and educational freedom, any one of those issues, I will run it up the hill for you, and I will make sure that you get heard. I'll make sure it gets to the top of the heap. That's what I can do for you. I can also interview any of your leaders on the Hill if they'll come on my radio program, and I can put that on the website so you have access to that. But we can work this together because congressmen and senators are at the very end of the process. By the time it gets to them, there's so much societal pressure pushing on them. They just want to know, can I be reelected? I hate to tell you that. But if you come in and they realize, oh my gosh, I got this whole constituency that's saying you can't do this, they listen to that, okay? So I'll help any way that I can. All right, enough. Any questions? Yes, sir. Okay, the Equality Act. What's the status on the Equality Act? Do we need to have microphones? Okay. Actually, the Respect for Marriage Act is the one that took it. So you won't hear anything, I don't think, anymore about the Equality Act because they've got it all in the Respect for Marriage Act. As I said before, that was kind of one of those, I'm beginning to realize how politics works. Right before an election, where a guy's going out or a senator's going out, they'll switch their votes on things because they're not up for re-election. And that's how that got passed. We should have we put pressure on people, but we didn't realize they were going to flip. We just didn't do it. But the Equality Act was that same thing where they're weaponizing the LGBTQ movement. And understand what the LGBTQ movement is now, okay? Because we still operate with wrong definitions. It's the notion that I can today decide that I'm a male or a bisexual or a homosexual or a heterosexual, and tomorrow I can decide the exact opposite. And you have to honor both. It used to be, we were taught that homosexuality and heterosexuality were immutable. You were born that way. And so you Christians, you just got to get over your bigotry, blah, blah, blah. It's not about that anymore because there is no immutability. It's a spectrum, and you choose on the spectrum, and you decide, and it changes overnight. And society must come to grips with what I say about myself at any moment in time. Well, you cannot have a society like that, because that's 350 million people who can change their minds every day. That's chaos. That's what it is. So what they're saying is you have to teach that chaos in your schools. And we're saying, no, we're going to start with male and female, and then we'll learn how to struggle with each other in our own brokenness with response to that. They're saying you're not going to be able to do that. So that's what that was about. Too many people thought it was just about tolerance again. We're going to have to fight that back, because eventually that will come to your school if you don't stop it. Yes, sir.
At the beginning, you talked about Christian nationalism.
Yes.
I know what that is, but I think you need to define that a little bit.
You can't.
Well, actually, I went online and looked it up, and they're saying those are the people who want to push Christian as the only religion in the U.S. And while we may not disagree with it, again, that goes against our Constitution of freedom of religion. But these are the people, the name sounds nice, Christian nationalism, but it isn't nice. It's one of those things that sound pretty and they aren't.
But it isn't what we're teaching.
The point is, some people may not understand and they go, oh, well, Christian nationalism, I can get behind that, but not realizing exactly.
Yeah, but you're beating the wrong horse, because the people who are making the accusations are also the one creating the definitions, and all of that is to smear us because we're not doing it.
That's my point. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, but again, if you run around saying it's not a good thing, you're actually, let me put it to you this way. Right now, Candace Owen is in a big snit. I don't know if you know who Candace Owen is. She's been leading this Blexit movement, black conservative movement. But right now, she's in a snit with some Jewish leaders, okay? She's in a big snit with that. And she doesn't realize that she's being aligned with Hamas and BLM in some of her way of talking. Well, Hamas and BLM hate her. They hate her. And I like Candace Owen a lot. Okay, so I'm not picking any sides here. I think there's some other stuff going on that we're not hearing about. But my point is, if you see, I call it the cycle of silencing. They accuse us of something that they make up and accuse us of it. Then we start to either respond by defending ourselves, saying, we're not that, we're not that, we're not that. Or some say, we should be, we should be, we should be. Guess what they just did to us? They turned us on each other. Or we silence and say, well, that's not us, it'll just go away. It never does. And then as soon as they silence us and push us back and realize that if you go out there and talk about it at all, you're going to get punished. If you talk, like if you actually said Christian nationalism is a nice thing, they would destroy your business. So they get this cycle going, and then at the very end, we're like, like a boxer, boom, boom, boom. And they didn't care at all. They just whoosh, and then they come up with a new challenge, a new caricature. You're racist. You're bigoted. I'll give you an example. They call Christians racist today, like fascists. We're not fat. We're the anti-fascists, right? Yeah. I mean, so my point was, and I finally said to one person, I'm not sure. You're a Democrat, right? Yeah. I'm not sure how the party of Jim Crow, the party of KKK, and the party that couldn't stand, that wouldn't let Jesse Owens go to the White House. Jesse Owens even said Hitler treated me better than FDR. I'm not sure how I have to be answering you about that since I'm the party of Lincoln. See, but most Christians today are arguing why they're not racist because they've called us that. That's what's going on with Christian nationalism, because what you just said was a definition. That's one definition. There's many of them. Well, Christian nationalism is what's called a theocratic view of government, where God is it's kind of like what's happening in Iran. Iran is a Muslim theocracy. There are people who accuse America of being that want a American theocracy. That would be Christian nationalism. The problem I have is, show me any Christian thinker in America who teaches that. There aren't any. Because our foundational principles, which are biblical, created the differentiation of church and state and actually give everybody freedom. 350 million people of all different religions have more freedom in America than anywhere other place. And what they're saying is those biblical principles are Christian nationalism. See, my point is, they don't want your clear definition. I could easily say, if that's the definition, nobody's doing it, they're wrong. Boom, we're done. They'll say everything from, even if you believe that there's a God in heaven who gives you rights that the government doesn't give you, you're a Christian nationalist. That's what they just did. And Christian nationalism is anything. Rob Reiner just did a movie on it, so if you want to watch what they think about the movie, did you see it? Okay, my point is be careful, because the idea of saying that's not who we are, don't think it's a positive thing, you're doing their work. You're actually dividing yourselves up against each other, and they are smearing you with it. They don't want a dialogue with it.
I think it's great that Rob Reiner's an atheist.
Yeah.
Proclaims and he's taking Christian documents.
Yeah. I would just say the bigger issue, instead of actually getting drawn into that cesspool, I would say, and listen to my podcast about Christian nationalism, how to respond. But the better one is to say, no, the bigger threat to our culture is secular nationalism. Yeah, that's the bigger threat. That'll destroy us all.
Anyone else with a question before we go to break?
Yeah, I know, we're getting late, long in
All
the
right,
tooth
I'm
here.
bring the microphone
Okay.
to you. I feel like Phil Donahue.
Man, is it already that time?
I'm thinking back on the WHO comment that you made. Can you give us an example of what you do to approach the government on these issues?
Well, right now, I mean, since we just found out about this, we're working with a whole. There's certain things I can and cannot do. I mean, I'm one person in a cog of people. Okay, so I work with lots of groups. So Frank Gaffney and his group are actually organizing this, and they're working with Alliance Defending Freedom and the Beckett Fund and Liberty, and they're all putting together a movement that will sign petitions. I've already signed that petition. I'm going to give you that petition too, that says we will not stand for this. We will push back for this. That petition will be given to our elected folks in that. I'm just a little cog in that, and then I told Frank I would tell my people about it, okay? When I meet on the Hill, I meet with Values Action Team people. We tried to deal with the Respect for Marriage Act, both personally and corporately, because we worked with all these groups on the Hill to make sure the senators knew our position. They just ignored it, okay, in this case. Other cases, they don't. They listen to us and they vote accordingly. That's government. So Values Action Team, I work with the Baptists, the priests. I work with all the different organizations on the Hill, the educational organizations. We all work together. I interview them. I post those online so you can work with them, on particular issues. But we tend to come together as a group when we deal with something like this. And there's a spearhead, Frank Gaffney, because that's his bailiwick. He deals with sovereignty issues, okay? And then we try to join. Is that helpful? And so right now, if you go online, and we'll teach you where to go, this issue with the WHO is, I don't know where it's going. It should have been stopped in Congress. Our senators should have voted this down. They didn't. So that's why we have to do this.
So we're going to take a 15-minute break.
Yeah, take a 15-minute break.
Of the hour, and you can enjoy a little conversation over a cup of coffee and other snacks for the next 15 minutes, and we'll reconvene at 11:30.
And I'll be up here if you want to ask any questions. The real practical stuff's coming. That'll be Mark. But I try to set you up. I hope I set you up for it.
Well, let's see. Yeah, they got. I can hear me. I can hear me now. How'd that work?
All right, everyone, make your way back. Get your goodies, get your sandwiches. Thank you to all of our LCRL folks who helped to provide our refreshments and the snacks that we're sharing in. We're going to call everyone back to order here and turn things over to Reverend Mark Frith. We're happy to have him join the team at the LCRL level and to be here at Emmanuel for the first time. So your attention, please, to Reverend Frith as he leads this next section.
All right. Thank you very much, Pastor. Let me just see to make sure this thing's going to work. It does. Good, good, good. Well, how many of you, this is brand new stuff for you, so what you've heard so far today? Because I know Dr. Seltz mentioned that you've heard this all before. So just a quick 15 seconds about me. So former parish pastor in 2 congregations, then into a district office role, then to Lutheran Hour, where Dr. Seltz was, and we got to work together for a couple of years. And then I was off to Lutheran Church Extension Fund, where I work with congregations in ministry campaigns and ministry planning. Don't tell Dr. Seltz, but I still have 4 churches that I'm wrapping up their ministry planning with. The really cool part about that, though, oh, he's still there. Two of them, they are coming on board as champions churches, though. How about that? Don't tell LCF that. I wear these 2 hats, if you will. So, and then, a couple of years ago, Dr. Seltz asked if I would consider a role like this. And I remember saying, I'm not sure, maybe not. And I thought maybe I'd be going back into the parish and finishing up, my career, if you call it that, my calling, my vocation as a parish pastor. And then he actually came and called and said, I want you to be a part of this. And so my wife and I, we prayed about it. And for our sake, it felt like it was the harder decision to make. Partly because Dr. Seltz's role was the harder role to take in his own life. If you were to ask him, if he weren't in the room right now, what would he prefer to do? I'm guessing he would probably say, I'd rather not do what he's doing right now. It's the harder thing. You hear the evangelistic heart that he has and where he would like to be. And part of it, he's been coaching me up in this role because it's so easy to want to go into that right-hand kingdom work and to be an evangelist, a preacher, a teacher type. Not that we get to do that some, but it's understanding this role. So what I want to talk to you today about is a little bit about what you've already been doing as a congregation. Is there anybody here who's not from Emmanuel? Where are you from? Which church? Living Water. All right. Anybody else? Thank you for joining us and being a part of this. Do you have friends in this congregation? Okay. Well, we're grateful for it. So was this the first you've heard of this, or you've been a part of this stuff? No. No, I wanted to check in. For a lot of people that I get to talk to, this is their first time. And so we'll walk through it. And, because this congregation, you guys have been through as a Champions Church. It's on your website as that. You've been rolling through it for several years and have been one of Dr. Seltz's, the word pupil comes out, but it's not that. Participants in a Champions Church and walking through that. So what we're doing is we're trying to develop this on a network basis, and that's what I really want to talk to you today about. So some of these slides I'm going to fly through, and I'm going to do this. I'm just going to give you a bunch. These are my handouts. All right? Great. Yep. And it's just to walk alongside of me. Some of it's fill in the blank, and I've got a key that's here, so if you miss some of that, you really think that's what we need to do, we'll walk through it. But some of this I probably will walk through faster because you're already participating in a way. What we're doing is trying to make this, build it into an organizational approach to it. So the Champions Network is what we're calling that. Okay? So a little bit of by way of introduction, and my wife said, why don't you just get to the stuff right at the set? So that's what I've done. I've taken a slide that comes up lower, and here you go. When we talk about the Champions Network and a platform and how we're going to build this, how do we gather people across the country, across congregations, how do we build this up? There's really 4 areas, and there you'll see those there. All right, it'll show up later on in the script that you'll see, but here we go. Number 1 is what we're doing right now today. We're Dr. Seltz and I, we're so grateful for the invitation to come back again and for him to be able to speak and update you on what's happening and where we're at today. This is an event. We would call this a Liberty Weekend, a Liberty Saturday. Dr. Seltz has been invited to preach tomorrow, so it's like a Liberty Sunday, an opportunity to speak to the Bible class, and hopefully folks that weren't here today will be able to visit with a little bit there. These are, I would just call number 1, what the network was going to do is provide all kinds of special events, all right, where we're connecting people together. You've been meeting together, but what would that be like if you were actually in some way, in many and various ways, connected with other Christians across the country, other Christians across Ohio. I don't know why I said that. Dr. Seltz is talking about in D.C. having Lutheran roundtables, that our Champions people could be invited to come there. Come for 2-3 days. Come for one of the 3 or 4 days that we have there. Have a chance to meet with people that Dr. Seltz is coming alongside. He would like to have conversations, invite you to have conversations and questions for them. Well, we're, online webinars, on topics like you heard a little bit today. It will feature various speakers like Dr. Seltz and others that you hear on the podcast, a chance to introduce you to them. And then it's really endless. Those are the events that we would like to bring across. And I'm only scratching the surface here. And so I'm asking the group here, the Champions Church, would that be helpful to you? Would that help invigorate you? Would you be willing to help invigorate and encourage others who are walking through this? And what's that like? Number 2 is what I'm simply calling the academy. And I would say for this first year or two, we're going to see which terms stick and which don't. You've been doing that. You've read through some books, or at least the group here has done that. I simply want to just slightly, I don't want to formalize is not the word, but it sort of is. And I'll show you an example of what I mean later on. But you're walking through. For you, what I would encourage you to think through is, how do we start a brand new cohort of champions? You've had a cohort of people that are meeting together, been reading through books, you're reading through something currently. But what about people that are brand new? How do they join you? And when they come into your group, do they automatically feel all these people know so much? And are we teaching them? What if a few of you who are here as champions would hive off and work with us, a new cohort of people? You can all meet together, but there would be a time when you say, hey, you get started here. Here's the first reading and the first activities we'd like you to work through. Does that make sense? I'm really looking to you for some of those answers. When I'm dealing with a brand new congregation, I'm saying, here's the way it is. Okay? Here's where I want you to start reading first. And I want you to meet on a monthly basis as best you can. And about every 3rd month, you're going to have me beaming in on a Zoom meeting because I want to hear what's going on, what's happening in your group. How can we support you? That probably will happen again in month number 6 in that year, and I might actually have Dr. Seltz say, would you come in and talk for 10 minutes? And then we're going to get 20, right? Because we really want 30. But what's the conversation to beam in? But we're meeting in those other times. So anyways, if you see on the screen number 2, we've got a curriculum of sorts. I'm going to show you just a couple of mocks of what that looks like. So there'll be monthly opportunities for lessons. And they'll be set up so one of you can be the leader of that, but you're like a discussion leader. There'll be plenty of video teaching that will come along the way. You'll be encouraged to read a book, and maybe read a book over the course of 3 or 4 months. Maybe it's a book that you want to take the whole year to read through. I don't know. What's your reading pace? Let me ask you this. When you read a book, how long do you take to read a book? I would really love some feedback with your Champions group. On the book. So what was the shortest amount of weeks or months that it took that you read?
First of all, I want those of you who have been members of the LCRL Champion Church Steering Committee at Emmanuel to be identified. Because not everyone here has been a part of this reading plan. And so if you've been a member, raise your hand, keep it up so Reverend Frith can see who you are. And I'll hold my hand up, and the two in the back there too. Okay. So those are, and he's really asking, and I'm going to put this mic in your hands over here, Reverend Dr. Seltz, and then I'm going to get the other mic and head over there. This is feedback time, so quickly, raise your hand if you've got something to say.
I'm trying to remember, but didn't we go through Eric Metaxas' letter to the Christian church? Did we go through that one pretty quickly?
That was not even a part of
I
the
know
reading
it wasn't part
plan.
of this, but we
So
did that.
we did go through that one
was
more quickly.
fast.
We threw it in as an extra.
The others, I'm thinking we probably took several months to read them, 2 to 3 months, probably to read one book.
Anybody else over on this side want to
And let me
pipe in?
just say something about that. We both found out that maybe some of these books were harder to read than we thought.
Okay, no, we don't need you to whack us down too much. But, we struggled with that. So, again, that's why I brought him on, because he's going to help you go through some of these a lot more, with a lot more of us being a part of that with you. There are some books you do need to master, but others that it might be harder to master than we thought.
Live Not by Lies, right up there at the top. Free to Believe, right up there at the top. Paradoxical Vision, right up there at the top for me. I found, but when it came to Thomas Sowell, I was struggling big time.
What did we have you read for Thomas? I can't recall.
What book did we read of his? Conflict of Visions.
Oh. And you know what? You know why you probably had a hard time with that? Because he was writing all from a left-hand kingdom. He wasn't writing from a Christian worldview, but he was saying those of us who believe that the one vision is limited, which is those who believe in sin. He wouldn't use the word sin, but obviously we're not unlimited, right? Because we can't even do what we want to do, right? That's the limited vision of life.
That's the restrained and unrestrained stuff. I halfway through it started clicking for me. I'm a simple-minded preacher. Anybody else over here who's been a part of the reading in our meeting times?
You're very right.
Anyone else want to pipe in about any aspect of what was being?
That is helpful if you have counsel on those things, because when we introduce this, and when I introduce this to the many and myriad of churches that we want to draw into your network of champion churches, what's worked. Now, so for me, as I come at this, I grew up in a blue-collar home with mom and dad that weren't highly educated, had a high school graduation diploma, were truck drivers and school secretaries. All right? I wasn't planning on doing what I'm doing. I was planning to be a truck driver. That was what my calling still is to this day. All right? But God keeps interfering with that. They do need preachers, and I'm thinking you should talk to my wife, because she said, yeah, this marriage is over if that's the case. But right. There's some more I could go. So I'm a ever-growing student all the time. So I come at it, all of this, from a blue-collar standpoint. My mindset is still that. And I'm thinking, would my mom and dad read these books? And they typically don't read. So what do I need to do? So we're thinking, Dr. Seltz and his team, when they launched this, those mom and pop papers, they went after my mom and dad. That's what he was eyeing. See, so that's what captured my interest. So when it comes to a book, How many people would be scared away from your champions group if you required them to read a book? That's my mentality, is thinking through for this network, those that love to reading, we need to give you plenty to chew on and read. But let's not forget others where this isn't. A lot of people don't come to pastor's Bible class or anybody's Bible class because they don't ever read their Bible and they feel stupid. We need to gather them into this. What does this look like? Let's help them. So a champions group, as we're thinking through this thing, this is hard enough the way it is, let alone you bring in a whole quadrant of people that are going, man, I'm not even sure. You know, if I don't go to Bible class, can I come to this class? Can I come to this champions group? Because there's something of that's interesting. I feel like I'm compelled. I want to walk that out. And that's why these first couple of years, everything we put together, I'm not sure that it's going to work. Would you help us with that? That would be my thing. All right, so monthly lessons, video teachings that are incorporated into that, discussion guides, all right, with discussion helps that are in there. What's the conversation are you having? And then how about weekly learning? So you certainly saying, hey, would you read one chapter this week? And would you read another chapter the next week? Can you work that through? Most people probably could do that, don't you think? Now, some of you would consume a book in a week. And you should. We need a special track for that. And there's lots of bibliography stuff that we can help point through. So we're working through those things. And just helping people to grow. In that academy, one of the things that I'm flirting with right now, and that's because Dr. Seltz has turned me on to all kinds of groups, and I've been listening in. Did I keep this in my book? Yep, I think I did. That's the Bible. Everybody should have that. There's a group, and there's probably others out there. All they do is teach Constitution. Because most Americans, we don't know the Constitution. This one's called Biblical Citizenship in modern America. All right? Wouldn't it be fun, as a part of what we're doing and a part of our Champions Academy, that we actually have an opportunity for you to work through this? Now, this one I don't have geared up at all, but I want to be able to offer something like this. They actually have video teachings that are really, really quite capped. Dr. Seltz, have you seen the Patriots Academy? I've not talked to you about that. They got 3 versions of this. And that's what's interesting. It's like a bunch of Christians and Christian scholars and former legislators that were a part of this thing. But they're all coming from that. This particular biblical citizen is made for congregations. They have another one that's just called, if you're not going to, you want to invite other people in, they'll do one where it's simply they just talk about Constitution and they'll talk a little bit about God, and like we heard today. And there's another one if you want to teach it at your gun club, or someplace where they don't really talk about God at all, other than to say, remember what our framers found. I thought that was interesting. But I think something like this also could be very helpful, especially when we're equipping one another, right, to be left-hand kingdom people and really understanding this. There's some things in here that are talked about that we would probably have to wrap around and say, you know, as a Lutheran, for us, I don't know, are you Lutherans? Yeah, okay, from your church, but there's an aspect where it's, you know, we need to be a little bit concerned about where you're coming from. There's some frame of references here. Well, we might give us a little bit of heartburn, but by and large not. So we would want to wrap that around. So I'd have Dr. Seltz create a bunch of videos for that. So and I'll just leave this here if you want to just take a peek at that. But I found that I went through that course. I went through lickety split, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of good stuff here. And it would be fun to have our champions churches and our champion academy people just kind of, hey, there's another resource. And we talked about all kinds of that. You could do that, Pastor, as a Bible study on Sunday. That could be something, you know, or a group where you could do that. That's another way that you begin to wet through. Be really great for, you know, our champions leaders and our champion pastors to do something like that. The Champions Church is what you are, and you're kind of modeling that, but what does that look like? Ooh, what's happening here? What is that? Do you see that on the screen? What is that? Zoom, somebody's trying to call me. And by the way, is that actually full focus? I guess it is. It shows up strange on my screen. Oh, well, I'll leave it as is. As a Champions Church, generally, once you've worked through the first year of the Academy Apprentice Program, we want to invite your congregation to come alongside of those champions and say, we're going to help you work through. As a champion, that first year of academy work, you've actually developed at least a very basic advocacy plan for your community. Here's how you're going to go out and start looking for how is God involved in our community? What is he already doing as a left-hand kingdom person? Okay? You're going to do that. What other ways can we get out there? How can we be praying for leaders? How can we have conversations for them? How do we get to build up our community as champions? That's what we're doing. Champion Church is doing that. And probably so much more, being connected to others. What does it look like? So that when these major issues happen politically, our congregations and our pastors feel supported. And then that's number 3. Number 4, just quickly to say, let's build a national network. Let's connect people like yourselves to others, where you can encourage them, they can encourage you. Be a part of something where it's moving along. Because here's the reason why. Oh, man, come on, get out of there. Dr. Seltz started off with Jack Phillips, the cake guy. Who's coming alongside of him? Lori Smith. Which of us came alongside of her when she was under assault for almost 8 years? All right? The Michigan law now, where they're going after 2 and really 3 organizations on you have to hire these kinds of people, and if you don't, you're in trouble. All right? Simply that. Mike and Kathy Berkey, who want to foster kids, but they have been told they cannot by the state of Massachusetts because they're traditional Bible-believing Christians. Who's coming alongside of Mike and Kathy? Texas, 2019. Who's come alongside of our pastors and alongside of Dr. Seltz touched on something similar to this. On death row. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you have to allow clergy to come in and visit with people. It's either all or nothing. And Texas voted, okay, no clergy at all. Who's coming alongside in that situation? Here's a Muslim woman who applied to a retail shop and understood that you can't wear hats at this firm, but they did make an exception for a Jewish man. And so she applied because she wanted to wear her scarf. Well, it worked out. The regional manager found out she did not want any Muslims working in her store, and they found a way to not hire her. So one of the ADF, I think it was, is the one that has been working her case. And here's the opportunity. Now, here's somebody who's not a Christian. But this fits First Amendment stuff. Who's coming along and helping, right? To come alongside others. Kind of goes to the answer of Christian nationalism to some degree, that whole thought, saying, hey, we're here. It's constitutional. How are we coming alongside? Our network should be able to come alongside of people. In Kansas, I had the opportunity to visit. They call them the LCMS Public Servants Group. We have 10 LCMS members in the state of Kansas who are either a representative or a senator. And they invited me to come because, by the way, I live in Kansas City on the Kansas side, and I know that area a little bit. And somehow I think that's why one of the federal judges said, hey, we meet as a public servant group about once a month, most of the time on Zoom, and we read a book just like the people in Kettering, Ohio do. And they study online. Would you come and talk to us? One of the questions I asked them said, tell me, how do your congregations come alongside and support you as a legislator? Do you know what they said? Well, once in a while we hear Pastor pray for us. He prays for all public servants. We like that. That's encouraging to us. The other time we hear from our fellow members is when we voted the wrong way on a tax bill. So I'm thinking that the network thinks through. I wonder how many LCMS people in Ohio are a part of your legislature. Do you know? We should find that out, don't you think? I know we have ways to do just that. And so part of our network is you can come to this website, hit this button, find out who it is. You probably can do that already, and those of you who are savvy in terms of politic might know that already. We want to make that a part of something you can easily access. Would that be helpful to you? All right, Dr. Seltz talked about Act for America, where you can literally do even more than that. That's forthcoming. We hope it'll come within the next couple of weeks. That may be a little. We need that to be as quickly as we can so you can connect and you can literally share support and encouragement to your legislators on bills that are up before, both in Ohio as well as the federal. Make sense? We need to do that for people like Samantha here. Religious broadcasters. This is something that recently hit the script here, saying, wow, we're going to make the religious broadcasters for Christian music pay 18% higher fees than you would if than the jockeys do on NPR. All right? This is something that's on the National Religious Broadcasters, who just shared in one of the groups I'm with, said, here's one of the things we're fighting. We need your help. This is something that the network needs. Were anybody aware of this one in this room? All right? Yeah, I mean, this is the stuff, and these are the kinds of things that if I wasn't doing this and if I'd been called into the parish, I probably would be very oblivious to this, and maybe rightfully so. But our network, no longer. This is the kind of thing when we meet together, when we're reading and studying, even here at Emmanuel and other places, we're going to take time to pray for these people. So that's something that also our group is also developing, is just a way to be praying for people. If the least we can do is be praying for individuals like this working through this stuff. The gender transition mandate stuff. Oh my goodness. Were you aware of this in 2016? Oh my goodness. You can read what's on the screen. I don't have to read that for you. Right now, there's a bill in the Massachusetts legislature to try to make sure this is solidified so this can't happen again, at least there. How are we aware of this? Our champions, we want the champions to be aware of things like this. How do we come alongside of people with this? How can we support? Those are the kinds of things we're doing. Here's a dude out in Idaho. This was back a few years ago. That was kind of striking that he was a construction worker and wanted to open up his own business just because he wanted to work closer to home, was tired of being away from his family. I mean, the dude was well into his 50s and wanted to apply, but, you know, you're supposed to put your Social Security number on this. Suppose this guy here, I forget, George, in his Social Security number, he's got 3 digits that are 666. And for a lot of Christians, that's the mark of the beast. Well, for all of it is, but for some, that's very, 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 very literal. And he said, I don't want to put that on my application to get my independent contractor's license. Now, as it says here, and it doesn't say here, but the background is, if you're a foreign worker in our country, all you have to do is provide a birth certificate. He applied for a religious exemption because of this, and they denied him. Took it all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court would not hear the case because the Supreme Court can't hear every case. I don't even know what happened to the dude. Here's a Seventh-day Adventist, all right? Worked many years for Walgreens. Had a regional guy that said, we got to have a meeting on a Saturday. He'd always gotten from his boss, he's a model employee. All right? And his boss always gave him an exemption, never had to work on a Saturday because for a Seventh-day Adventist, that is a holy day. That is the seventh day. It's a day of rest. He just doesn't do it. He ended up getting fired because he, in principle, said, I can't go against my God. I go to worship. That's my Sabbath. He lost his job. Who's coming alongside of Daryl? And then the morning after pills, all right, up here, the pharmacist up in Washington. 3 families that were really were targeted with this thing. When you read the background on this case, you just shake your head, a little bit like Dr. Seltz was sharing some of those things for you too. We want our champions to come alongside of these people, not because they're Lutheran or not Lutheran, but because, hey, there's religious freedom in this thing. We need to beat this thing. We need to wrap, right? I love Dr. Seltz. This is amazing, to wrap the scarf around the lion's mouth on things like this. Our champions want to mount this up. Now, this is another thing I didn't hear Dr. Seltz, but it's something that's his analogy. But Dr. Seltz, I've been raising this up. We want our champions. We're raising up the 300,000 champions. Can we do that in 5 years? Can we raise up to 300,000 champions in a network? Well, Jesus fed the 5,000 in one sitting. The 300s that take off. Anybody see the movie The 300 about the Spartans? That's where that whole thing comes from, right? We want to raise up to 300,000. Is that too many? How many people in the LCMS? How many members? Do we know? I don't know what it is. I don't actually know. I can ballpark it. We always say we were 2.1 million, but that was a couple of decades ago. What do you think we are today? Let's just be conservative and say 1.8 million LCMS people today. Would you be okay with that? Can we get 300,000 champions out of 1.78 million people? What do you think? Would you pray about that? Appreciate that. All right. Well, Dr. Seltz went through all of this. I don't need to do that with you. La-da-da-da-da. What do I want to say here? Oh, yes. He's got it. Can we get 300,000? Could, if the Lord wills it.
So that was say that again. That was 2,006,000 congregations. Yeah, 9,000 pastors and 2,200 schools. I think the schools will be the first battle line. So I think we can get.
Yes.
They don't know that yet, though.
Yes. There's not enough time to talk about that, but our Kansas legislature said, hey, if our Lutheran schools could do this. We're battling on the Hill in Topeka. But our Lutheran schools, we're not getting enough from our parents. If they would only speak into this more, that would be helpful. So again, the Champions Network, as we draw together, strengthen the voice, empower the voice to live that, that's what we want to do. That's why we want to build the network. Part of the Liberty Action Alert, there's an email that comes out when you sign up for the Word from the Center. You get your Monday devotion, you get your Friday op-ed. Usually on Tuesday or Wednesday, you get to say, hey, by the way, stay tuned to the Liberty Action Alert that's posting on Wednesdays on our website. We want to jump on that, and if Dr. Seltz is okay with it, which he could tell me, no, don't ever do that in front of a group, but what if we called it the, this is why I'm living on a short leash. I do this all the time. My wife says, you are not going to live long if you keep doing this to him. I just want to say, I'd love to brand this the Champions Liberty Action Alert. Because what he does on Wednesdays is he's championing, he's bringing up a voice and strengthening it. He's teaching all of us on Wednesdays or whenever you listen to his podcast. What I want to do is with that Liberty Action Alert, Champions Liberty, I want to bring in some of the stories that we just quickly looked at. And to say, so when you get that email about that Tuesday or Wednesday, listen to the podcast. What flows beyond that is the Champions Briefing. Here's the people. You can, continue to pray about, think about, what could our champions churches, what could they do in rallying around some of these people that are battling, that are in this for their life? Does that make sense? What do you think about that? You're all nodding, going, hey, either I got to go to the bathroom right now, or I'm tired and I got to go home.
Is that the news
that's what we were talking
dossier
about.
that you wanted to put out there?
Yeah.
Okay. I like it somewhat. No, I like it. Because we want to provide more concrete information for you to pray about and act on, as well as to know why you're doing it. We're trying to do both, but we need to do more for you that way.
So while Dr. Seltz, why he's invited me and to build a team that will continue then to build the Champions Network, I would love to have somebody from Emmanuel or Kettering to be a part of my national team, all right? Kind of like when you build a network, you kind of got to build it in stages, but, we want to build leaders within leaders. And so I'm looking to that for that. But still, while Dr. Seltz has given us to do that, he still is the champion's champion. And he's going to be doing teaching on our national network and what we're doing. Okay, good. Let's roll. What do we got to do? Okay. I'm going to skip all this. This is where we talk about, right? There's a number of passages that help us to undergird us. This is one of those. Again, we live as people who are free. No matter what somebody else may do to us, they can't take away the freedom that we have in Christ Jesus. All right, Daniel went into the lion's den. He went willingly. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they went into that furnace willingly. When you read that text in the book of Daniel, you don't see that they were, digging their heels in. It's not that they walked in. We live as free people. Work it through. Here's that quote that Dr. Seltz had before. It's also abridged, if you will. This is from Robert Rice, and since he touched on that, I'm not going to touch on that one. And I love it. Here's one of his slides that he had that wasn't shown today, but I remember him teaching on this several times. I just changed the picture. So many people are afraid to get involved as champions because we're afraid, right? There's one thing you never do at the Thanksgiving table or at the neighborhood celebration. You never talk about three things. What are they? Religion, politics, and money, right? Somehow you like that one. Don't talk sports. We do, don't we? Yes. Some of the worst recreational leagues, perceptibly, are Lutheran recreational leagues, right? Man, the Lutherans, it's in our heritage. I'm not even a German, so I'm not sure it's even German. It's Scandinavian German of some kind, but yeah. But Dr. Seltz quoted Aesop a while back, and he says, it's easy to be brave from afar. But Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Esther, love those texts. What our champions are doing is not standing up and saying, we're the champions. What we want to come alongside in all humility is to say, I want to champion your cause. I want to champion you. I want to come aside. That's what a champion is. We want to be that kind of knight. So that's what we're doing. All right, here's a raging river. It's very near Washington, D.C. Have you heard that phrase before? Raise your hand if you've read that, if you've heard that phrase across the top. Only one of you, two of you. All right, I just found out a couple weeks ago that it was Andrew Breitbart who first said that. I didn't know that. I've been quoting that, for a number of years, and now especially in this particular role, I go, wow, that's interesting, right? What does that phrase mean? Those of you who have read it, maybe you don't agree with it. Politics is downstream from culture. What does that mean? Yes, go ahead. Kim's right over here. Kim, wait, because we're recording this. Oh, he's got it.
Come on,
Dr.
Mark.
It means that things go in and out of the Overton window. Things are more accepted. And so it happens in the culture first, and then politics catches up. But then they reflect off of each other, basically.
Oh, interesting. So not today, but I want to hear more about the Overton window.
Here you go.
Mark that up. Yes, thank you. Woo.
That politics flows from culture.
Yeah, so interesting. So let me add to this. I ran across this phrase. Maybe you've heard it. Let's just add to it. Politics is downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from church. What does that mean now? What's the wrinkle? Right here.
If the church is not acting in accordance with the scriptures and everything else, then you get a downstream effect that is counter to Christianity.
Yeah. Now, this is a raging river that you see pictured here, right? All right, if you were floating this river, would you be at all worried? I mean, you're flowing fast, right? And do you feel like right now in culture, that culture is just, everything is zooming, things are changing so quickly, it almost makes your head spin, right? The interesting thing, and you'll hear this, and I've heard people talk about, you want to blame Washington, D.C. for all the problems that we have happening right now, but where did it really actually start? Who did? Say that again. We send people to Washington. What are they doing? What policies do they enact? What policies do they enact that reflect who? What's happening right here now, right? And whatever's happening now, they're only going to put in, Dr. Seltz talked about, they're always worried about the next election. They're going to do things that, right, the culture says, that's going to get me elected. Now, not everybody, the caveat there, but that's why this phrase, I think, is powerful. But just like Dr. Seltz would also teach, the framers understood that in order to have this kind of representational government, Benjamin Franklin said, if you can keep it, the church needs to be doing its thing way upstream. Culture is a reflection of what the church is or hasn't been doing. Would you agree with that? Dr. Seltz?
Let me just give you an example of that, too. It just came to my mind. When Rosa Parks sat on the bus, people don't understand, the bus companies were petitioning the government to get rid of these idiotic laws that were forcing black people to sit on the back of the bus. Why? Because they were their constituents. The culture was fighting because politics is the last thing to change. So free people, business owners, they were all fighting this because their own constituency were being treated badly by the laws that had been enacted. And so free people finally, as well as her sitting where she sat, caused that the politicians were the last people to get on board with that. Larry Elder tells that story very, very, very well about what was actually happening behind the scenes. Free people were just as disgusted as others, but the law, the people who were trying to keep people in place, hadn't yet changed.
Oh. Hey, weren't you also saying, Dr. Seltz, this book right here? I caught that for the first time. Is that the book there that you were saying?
Yeah, Darwin Day in America. There it is. Yeah,
Is
that's
that, you
the one
said
I'm
that's a
talking
new book?
about. It's a new book to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I was dialoguing with somebody about that, and he said, "Oh, it's all in Darwin Day in America." I said, "Good, I'll read it."
There you go. So if you want to scratch that down, it's not in your notes, but darwindayinamerica.com is the website, and then you can see the book. By the way, I ordered the book already. It should be at my house on Tuesday. Will this book end up on the Champions Academy to read list? We'll see. Some it will, right? I mean, maybe our mom and pops may not, but those that love to read and dig in, the Lord has called you to be a leader as a champion. That might be something we want to read. So I penned that and I said, wow, that's good. This is what I learned today, something more. Okay, good. So our champions, how many of you watched the Chosen series of Jesus? All right? I love that. And one of the things I love most about it is just the lead into it with the fish that are swimming upstream. My wife always, when it hits the go directly, I said, no, I want to watch the fish. I want, it's like they're gaining strength. Our champions, raising up to 300,000, we need them, 300,000 people. It's still going to be like those little white fish swimming upstream against everything else, but they'll be there, raising up the Shadrach, Meshachs, and Abednegos. Oh, thank you. Anybody know this guy? Raise your hand if you know this guy. Rick Warren. Who is he? What's he known as? Saddleback Church, the purpose-driven life guy, right? Saddleback's one of those mega churches. Look at the quote that I found this last week. Law is downstream from culture. Does that sound like what we just talked about? Yeah? Politics is downstream from culture. By the time you make a law about something, you're reacting and not acting. He says, I'd rather shape the culture. The role of the church, right, is to be that yeast in the leaven and the batch of dough of culture, and we're doing that. Praying that, to some degree you get a bit more. That's what we want our champions to be, we're not going to, again, it's not about winning everything, but it's about being a blessing as left-hand kingdom people along the way. I thought that was helpful. I've discovered that. Anybody been to the beach and make a sandcastle with your kids? Dr. Seltz and I, our first years were together in the Tampa area, and so our family did a lot of beach. We were closer to the sandy shores, I think, than his family was. We were there a lot. Kids love to make sandcastles. The kind we made are like this. Right? I wish. That looks a little bit more like that, but that's not my son. All right? I have a son and a daughter. Have you ever experienced this if you did this with your kids on the beach? And they would spend a couple of hours building stuff. They would just build stuff, and as they get older, and then the thing is, you just look at this stuff, and then you go off into the sea to kind of wash the sand off, and some kid comes along, and what does he do? He smashes your kid's sandcastle. And of course, the tears and the crying, and because what did my kids want to do after they built it and watched it? They wanted to smash it, right? It's the kind of thing that we do. It's like, hey, that's that creation, a part of that. So as a dad, the next time after you see that happening, what do you think my role was watching them build a sandcastle? What did I do? Protector, guard. I'm looking up and down the beach. Which little snot-nosed kid's going to come and do this, right? And so when you get a bunch of those kids walking, you get them stand up and you go, you can stand in between them. My kids are building sandcastles. They may be ugly as the sand. But I'm going to block them. So back to Dr. Seltz and his aspect of we're blockers. That's the practical analogy of this. And here's what our champions are really doing. The opportunity before us is to be defenders of the church's place in culture. You heard a lot about that before. We're there to say our champions will help Christians and others to help deter the state's encroachment in areas where it doesn't belong. And Constitution, we need to know a little bit of that stuff and really be able to voice and speak of that, and we're going to do that as champions. We're just getting stronger and stronger. One of the things that Pastor Mark mentioned before is that not everybody here, have been along the way with the champions group for as long, and there's some who are still at the point where we just want to learn more. That's what our champions group needs to do. You're always preparing for the opportunity for new people to come in and start learning anew. And some of our veteran champions, they're going to be mentors to that. They're going to walk alongside of them. But we need to build that in if it's going to be helpful so that we can empower them, point 3, to really be able to publicly be a Christian life. Now, I'm wearing a cross around my neck. You're wearing a cross around your neck. I've not always worn a cross around my neck like this. When I'm out in public, this makes me a little self-conscious. Anybody else have an experience like this? Because you volunteer at the hospital, you've always worn a cross. It marks you. Yeah. Yes. It's a sign. It identifies. And other Christians that see that, whether they do it or not, they're smiling inside, or sometimes they'll say, that's a really nice cross. Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, that's sharing. And that's the way we should always be. Do something that we can
Yeah.
help others with.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street.
Sure.
One instance, I work in the public, and people will come up to me, and every now I work at a library checking out books, and they'll come up and go, I like your collar.
You like your what?
I like your collar. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm wearing my cross.
Oh,
And there are times where it's the opposite, where I went to buy some groceries and the person checking out the stuff says, should I call you pastor or reverend? And I wasn't prepared for that, and I go, I'm just a Christian. And I realized how bad I made that sound to be a Christian. I'm just a Christian. Okay, but you know, it's a two-way street there. Some people do find encouragement by seeing it because they have a common connection.
yes.
And that's what we need. We need more common connections.
Yeah, so it's just it's a little piece, but the reason a lot of times where I wear, and I'll wear it because I oftentimes tuck it in here, but it's here. So the whole drive over from St. Louis yesterday, every time I would stop for gas or something like that, people notice that, whether they notice that in a positive way or not, but it actually identifies me in that way. I'm not saying everybody should wear this cross, much like clergy if they wear a clerical collar, kind of same thing. Now, pastors, when they wear clerical collars, they tend to drive their cars better. All right? Because they're representing you. You remember.
Let me jump in now. So in South Central LA, did anybody ever watch the movie Training Day with Denzel Washington? That was my neighborhood. Okay? Right around the corner. I served the church down the block in a little bit nicer neighborhood, but I used to walk by this entranceway and go over and get my donut and coffee every Sunday morning. I've worn my collar. And so my sexton said to me, hey, pastor, you watch Training Day? Yeah, I was, Denzel. You know where that neighborhood is? I said, no, I don't. He goes, right there. I said, what? He goes, yeah, you've been walking by it every time you go get a donut and coffee. I said, oh, I guess I better kind of watch myself. He said, nah, don't worry about it. I said, why? He said, you got your collar on. You're a white guy with a collar on. They're not threatened by you at all. But he said, but if I went in there, they'd kill me. Ooh. So it's interesting that sometimes we forget that God cares for us in ways. So I got less self-conscious about my collar.
Yeah.
I wore it very proudly down in South Central.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, it was a hard time. I remember when, in the Roman Catholic Church, when that slew of identity with, pedophilia and went through. And I noticed that a few times I was wearing my cleric collar as a pastor, and I walked through the grocery store, and I have all these people kind of sneering at you at the time because you just guilt by association in that sense. But again, we've kind of moved off topic in this sense. But again, being able to be empowered to live that, not just by wearing jewelry, but people notice this about who we are. All right, okay. Just to underscore, if you're tracking there, again, God engages two ways. We're looking for that as champions, his preserving or saving, and I added two words, ordering and preserving. All right, he has a certain order that he's given in this life, and he's constantly caring for it, just like my son and daughter are guarding their sandcastle, or at least I am for them, because there's an order to what they're doing. God does that in society for us, and then he's gracing and saving. He's always at work in that way, and the joy for our evangelists and our pastors and for you, when you get to witness the love of Jesus Christ, is you get to be gracing people, sharing stuff that they don't deserve because you don't deserve it, but he's given that to them. And that's what we mean by the left-hand kingdom that Dr. Seltz spoke about earlier, and the right-hand kingdom. Right-hand kingdom stuff that we get to do here at Emmanuel all the time. All right, sharing and witnessing and being that for other people, and that's why we needed to be. And most people that are in this work go, this is not the role, lay people, this is not the role of our pastors to be left-hand kingdom people. They have enough on their hands doing the right-hand kingdom stuff. Doesn't mean that they can't be involved and shouldn't be. Like yours, there's not as many pastors as yours that will take, an interest into what, you're doing right here. But that becomes important. But for our left-hand kingdom people, this is where we're growing thicker skin, and we're encouraging each other to be even more brave. And when we stand with each other, so important. Again, another reason why it's good for us to learn about who are our Christian politicians. How do we come alongside of them, help them to be accountable, but also to help them to do their work. All of that listening to the champions. Now, I happen to live in Kansas City, and recently, once again, they climbed to the top of the league. I am not a Chiefs fan, just so you know. I'm from Minnesota. I'm with the prevailing losing team called Purple and Gold, all right? They're worse than the Lions. But do you know who this is? You do know who he is. Do you know who this is? You know, it's Taylor Swift. Do you know who this is? Now, if you were in Kansas City, you would know who this is. He is the highest paid defensive lineman in the country as of right now. He just signed to be the highest. Chris Jones. It is one of the reasons why he's smiling. And to make Dr. Seltz's point, who are these guys? I asked that question in Kansas, and nobody can name these guys. Which one? Tooney? Joe Tooney, 62, right? Yeah. Oh, from Kettering. There's a reason why the Lord had me put this picture up here. Yeah, but even in Kansas and Missouri, Kansas City area, they couldn't name these. Some of them would get close, when it comes to this, but they don't know who they are. Now, the guy on your left, number 74, he is notorious. He signed last year with Kansas City. He is the most penalized lineman in the country as of right now, as of last year. So people know him, but they usually go, oh, are you going to sign him over again? Anyway, that's the only reason why people would know who he is in Kansas City. But again, like Dr. Seltz, nobody knows these people. And yet, if these guys aren't doing this, they're not protecting him. Patrick Mahomes, he would never be able to do his thing. And that's a big thing in Kansas City, that they protect Patrick Mahomes so that he and Kelsey and the kid out of Rutgers that, runs like he's mad at the turf, whatever his name, Isaiah Pacheco, Again, I learned all this because everybody knows these guys' names, but nobody knows the guys that are up front doing this kind of work. This is the analogy. This is Dr. Seltz's analogy, and I've loved it. And by the way, it works. Everywhere I use it, Dr. Seltz, it works. We want those linemen to become champions and to be people like this. People like this. People like this doing this. This stat I ran across recently, 30% of worshiping Christians regularly vote in our communities, our state, and our national elections. 30%. Now, hopefully that stat changes, and I misread that, but it's like, are you serious? And then among people who constitute themselves as Christians, about 30% of them worship regularly, whatever that means. So now you're talking about why we need to raise to 300,000 and give them an opportunity. I think one of the things that's going to birth out of this thing, and I've just been listening in, is I'm seeing a lot of parents, as I talk to them, I'm learning this, their kids are walking away from the church and the practice of worship. And they're pushing back, which you could say that's an evangelism kind of thing. And I'm thinking, but the kids are pushing back saying, why are you listening to this backwards ideology called Christianity? It doesn't work. This is what they're saying. So the champions for religious liberty, part of what I think our arsenal will become is saying we need to speak that narrative that's like pre-evangelism kind of thing. You got to have answers for, why this and why not that. God's no. We need to build that in. And again, here comes Bible study stuff. And so I've been listening to a lot to what pastors preach. I was anxious to hear what Pastor Mark was going to preach tomorrow, and then I discovered they have a guest preacher tomorrow. But this kind of stuff, these answers don't necessarily come on a Sunday morning sermon, but what are we doing in terms of feeding? And it's people like this, if we're going to get them to do this and to believe in really what, who we are as Christians, we need to work on that element too. They come in all shapes, colors, ages, and the like. These are our champions. These are the start of our 300,000 together with you, okay? That's what we're doing. Again, this is a slide, and we're at 12:30, and that's the time we said the noose is going to come out, 12:30 today. We're championing the right for others to live and believe per their conscience. It's First Amendment kind of stuff. We're championing the properly limited form of government. We're helping that so that the church can be what it's going to be. And for other religiously minded people can do what they need to do. We can't get in the way of that. We're going to champion the four main areas that we deem as religious liberty. These are those four areas. Dr. Seltz pointed those out. Religious liberty, a right of conscience, sanctity of life, marriage as an institution, and then educational freedom, school choice. Our champions, we want to work towards that. We need to come alongside of our politicians, our legislators, come alongside of them and do that. How do we strengthen? That's really what we're working towards. This is what our champions are going to center on. All right? I could say more about that, and I won't. Our outcomes, you can look at this. We want to be useful in God's hands for our communities. We want to help develop that certain mindset. As Dr. Seltz said, we just need to know this. We just need to know that. We just need, okay, that's what our academy is meant to do. What are those things we're going to do? Two kingdom educated, and so that we can express the two kingdom voice. All right, I'm going to move quickly. I'm not even going to do this. All right, you kind of get it. I usually stay silent during this time. As champions, all these folks need you. They need you to raise up that left-hand kingdom voice. We will be called on to be champions of religious liberty for others, because you're champions. We're going to help you become that. Not going to talk much about this. We talked earlier on about these things, but there's just a couple of samples of what that academy curriculum will look like. These are discussion guides, and I got my mug in there right now as a placeholder, but when you receive that, there will be video tutorials. Because one of the things, while your pastor is reading all this stuff with you, not all of our pastors will either come alongside, well, they'll probably come alongside, but they may not have time to read. We don't want this to have to depend upon local time. That's why we want to build into the Champions Academy stuff. Here's a teaching moment. Here's a teaching moment. And then discussion guides underneath that. Do you think that would be helpful? Now, pastors, you can use that or you don't. Devotions will kind of be the same way when you meet together, but you're caring for each other. That's what we're building into this. I'm just showing you, what a discussion guide will look like, and then how it will be delivered. Right now, a champions group, they would receive, just a few of them would at least have access to a platform that's digitally aligned, and this is where all of those tools are loaded. You can download it, print them off, share them. You could email those to your group and the like. And also through this tool, guess what? I'm able to stay in conversation with your group through this platform. And that platform comes to you gratis. You don't have to pay for that. That's just the way that we'll deliver these tools to you in the academy and keep you going. Okay? I have one last handout that I want to give you along those lines. Oh, they're right behind me. And this is what I share with others. I'm going to give half to you, Pastor Mark. Dr. Seltz, give half to you. This is just a half sheet, one page. And when I'm giving people an idea what it means to start a Champions Academy Group 1, I'm looking for 3 or 4 people. And if I could have one of those too, by the way, thank you. And then I'll see if you have any questions, and I'll wrap up here. I picked up on this when we would develop other things in congregations, and I found it was very helpful. When I was doing church campaigns, capital campaigns, and when I was doing ministry planning, we would build teams so that it didn't fall on the pastor alone or one individual alone. Now, you have a team that's operating, so I'm just sharing this in general, but when it comes to this, you'll notice that we'd love to organize this way, and I've got 5 positions. We don't have to be stuck to 5 positions, but if there were 3 or 4 people that would be willing to help lead the champions group, this is kind of how I think this is going to work well. You have somebody, one of the lay people will be like the champions director. And they're a person who, they probably read, they're probably ones that would help lead the discussion, but all the material is provided them. We have a champions prayer director. And that person, their sole job, and they can develop a prayer team among people, what do you think their job is to do? It's to pray. Keep things in prayer so that it doesn't fall to the champions director. He or she can count on that person. The next one is what? Champion communication director. Because you're going to be building a plan. And we've had some of our congregations that every month or two, they kind of put together a religious liberty newsletter. And they keep things in front of the office staff. And pastor doesn't have to worry about, do I communicate this thing? And they work for the director. And we found that that really works. That's helpful. Especially as we build the network. If something's happening over another part in Iowa, or something's happening in Iowa or in California, that stuff, the communication directors, they can pull that stuff and share that. Number 4 is a hospitality director, something that I can tell you guys do really well. Who are the people that set up all the vittles today? Would you raise your hand? Who helped provide for all of that? Thank you for that. Hospitality, that's such a long way. Did you see Dr. Seltz's mouth started watering when they said they got, egg and sausage sandwiches? Those are things that we tend to live on the road. So, all right, that's good. Hospitality goes a long way. It's very important, that we have that in mind, because when you're inviting new people, what's the hospitality traits that we need? If you have a one person that's leading that and they have a team doing that, guess what the director never has to worry about. But it's so key. In fact, every church council meeting probably should have that. Every board of directors probably should have something like that that's hospitality-wise. We see it practiced, and it goes just people say, wow, you really appreciate me. I thank you for that. And then what's the last one there? I'm just calling it that, a pastoral advisor, which says, Pastor, we would love for you to be involved with this. There's things that you might read that others wouldn't read. We'd love for you to do that. We'd love to speak. You can get involved as you wish in this. But what it's indicating is, Pastor, this, which is really a lay movement, like other great lay movements, like the LLL and like the LWML, those are all lay-led. And those are some of the most successful networks that we've had in our church body, wouldn't you say? We want the Champions Network to be that way too. And if our pastors and our teachers doesn't all fall on them, I think good things are going to happen. We're going to raise up to 300,000 together. Okay? So I wanted to share this with you, and I put my email down there. In the event that you want more information about that, just send me an email. This would be the easiest way. And do that today before you move on to other things, because after today, I know I'll never hear from you. Because that's how I operate, saying, oh, that'd be really good, and if I don't do it right away, it's gone. So, all right? Some of you have our numbers that are here, but if this is something that you want more information on, take back to your church. Take back to your church. Do that. We would love to. Yeah, sometimes, so some of our congregations are thinking about 3 or 4 congregations come together and they form a Champions chapter together. And sometimes that works. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because that's enough. It's 12:39. You gave me 9 extra minutes. Thank you. Any worries, comments, questions? I'm going to hang around. Yes.
Here, let's get you a mic.
Wait
Yeah.
for one moment, Christine. We'll hear
Okay,
what
here we
is
go.
on your heart.
It seems like, as I'm thinking through what you're talking about and applying it, we have 2 fronts, and this is maybe oversimplification, but we have a local front and we have a national front. And it seems like, we would need to try to get familiar with the local front in terms of issues that come up, and educate ourselves and people that are on the, wondering what in the heck we're doing. Invite them to go to school board meetings or to local, community meetings, because sometimes people I've talked to are so overcome by the weight of national issues that they just kind of want to hunker down and stay in the right-hand kingdom. And just kind of, say, no, not going to touch it, not going to go there. And we're going to be countering that. We're going to be defending the whole idea that there is a left-hand kingdom that we have every right to participate in. So it's kind of a challenge.
It is a challenge. You're right about that. But I think you're absolutely right. Starting at the local level, it becomes so important. Everybody's
Yeah, and
mentioned that.
technically, in our training process, if you remember the first year training process that now is going to be much more organized and clear, you were sent out into the community because we don't want you to become activists. We want you to become two kingdom practitioners. So we were going to send you to the school boards, send you to the police station, send you to the local. You become a local person among your local administrators and community, and you begin to, because politics still is local, properly understood. And we were going to send you out, but that first year, remember we said we don't want you to raise your voice at all. We just want you to listen. So the first year was meant to get you to see what it was like, what was out there. And if we have all of you developing that mindset, you will learn very quickly from each other, even on the website, about what might be local. But you're right, we've got to start locally.
I was on the other end of things, considering what was being shared today in our time together, and encouraged as we think on the large national level how we can work with one another, though. I appreciate you saying to us, Reverend Dr. Seltz, that if there's an issue related to Ohio, we can work with you to speak to those who represent us in terms of going to, and all the things you were pointing out, Reverend Frith, about ways that we have left our fellow believers many times, and even those of other faiths, without anyone showing concern and care. So we can, through the network that you provide us, have better access to and awareness of ways that we can be praying for those individuals. I heard the